Jose Huizar and Mitch Englander. And I want to welcome you to City Hall. There are several items today that we need to get through. And we'll try to move through these as quick as possible. I understand I have a card on every item today, so we do have to call them special. And item number 1 is referred to the planning department, so let's just hear public comment on number 1, if that's okay, my colleagues. Okay, so Charles Fisher and Mr. Walsh, come on up, please. And this item will be referred to the planning department. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes. And this is actually a pretty simple item. Somehow or other got delayed 4 months because it got through the wrong part. So I'm glad it's finally to plumb, and we were able to get this building, which was the nomination's actually been sitting in at the Office of Historic Resources for a while now, and it's. This is one of the most iconic buildings in the city of Los Angeles. I have personal history in it because my grandfather bought the land for it for water and power years ago. And this particular building was really the first green building in the city of Los Angeles before anybody knew what a green building was. Unfortunately, political correctness in the 70s started to erode some of the green aspects of the building, namely the fact that the fountains were the air conditioning and the lighting was the heating, which, they said, oh, this building's so lit up at night. They're using all this energy. But they were actually heating the building. Anyway, I'm glad it's going there.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Walsh, item 1.
Excuse me, is this public comment or number 1?
It's number
item
1,
number 1.
Item number 1, sir.
Okay, item number 1. John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. In the past 9 days, this blog has received 77,000 hits, and I have the information. Anybody wants to see it, I'll prove it to you from GoDaddy. 77,000. We're 100%, we're 100% in favor of number 1. This is just the beginning, and let's realize that we all live in the most densely populated city in America, and soon we will become the new Tokyo. That's what it's about, the new Tokyo.
Thank you, sir. So we'll refer this to the planning department with consent of my colleagues. And item number 2, we have the planning department coming on number 2. And Roberto, can you read that to the record?
Yes, council members. Item 2 is a joint planning and DOT report relative to the city's mobility element.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. For the record, my name is Jane Choi. I'm with the City Planning Department, and I'm here with
Sean Hyrie with LADOT.
And we're here today to give you a progress report on the mobility element update. The mobility element of the general plan is our city's blueprint for our future transportation system. It was last updated in 1999, and it is being updated this time around to reflect the vision and values of our future transportation system, given all of the updates and investments and with Measure R that has happened in the last 10 years. The current update began in July 2011, and it is a joint effort between the Departments of Transportation and Planning. It is a 3-year process funded in the first year by Measure R. The urgency behind the update is that just as an outdated land use plan creates development that does not reflect the vision and values of a community, our outdated transportation plan is creating undesirable outcomes such as street widenings where communities don't want them. The products that we're producing through this process include a new policy document with goals, objectives, policies, and programs that reflect our vision and values for our transportation future. a complete streets network that creates an environment that is comfortable for active transportation, so for walking and bicycling, and for connections to transit, as well as accommodating the vehicle. We are also creating new street standards and a streetscape manual to guide the design and implementation of our new system. We are revising our benchmarking tools so that we no longer count just vehicle level of service, but also account for cyclists as well as people who are walking and outcomes for them as well. And we are seeking a sustainable implementation strategy to fund and maintain our system. In terms of outreach, we have been engaging Angelenos through our LA to Be campaign. We have a virtual town hall set up with over 600 participants, and we've had a series of workshops with over 100 participants, and we are taking, the online conversation is continuing, but we are taking this input and are currently developing a complete streets network at the staff level, as well as taking a first stab at our goals, objectives, policies, and programs. In terms of the timeline, we are going to be taking our recommendations back out into the community in June, as well as briefing the council offices, and we plan to have a document by the fall that we can work through the environmental review process on, and so that'll continue through the fall into the next fiscal year.
Just to add a little bit, we are facing a situation where we're running out of places to widen the streets and do business as usual, which is to develop more car-centric transportation improvements to mitigate development impacts and also to deal with the congestion. So our new approach is to work with city planning to come up with strategies to develop a more balanced transportation network, which includes not only providing facilities and improving the vehicular service, but also to improve transit, develop transit corridors, transit priority corridors, where we give a choice to Angelenos to take a transit vehicle, ride their bike to make the connections, and have a more pedestrian-friendly environment to walk through. Also, because all the future funding sources might be tied into greenhouse emission reduction and also complete street acts, we are trying to develop that footprint and background so that we can develop more projects that are more fundable through future federal funding sources.
Well, one, I think it's important when you get to this juncture of looking at options. I think in London they're paying over $10 a gallon for gas. In Tokyo they're well over $10 a gallon. But they have public systems that essentially they're much farther ahead in terms of access for the public to get from point A to point B. Their overlays between rail and bicycle and everything else is just amazing. So I know we have a ways to go. One of my concerns is when we go through these community processes, how are we aware of the needs of the transit dependent? Like, how are you assured that you have the voice of the transit dependent being heard at these committees so you can involve and fold in their priorities as well? Because you have different lifestyles, if you will, income, access to public transportation, people that can get around more easily than others. On the sheer basis, they have the resources. How is that being addressed in your process?
That is a really important need in our community, and we've also heard from seniors who are asking for more taxi vouchers, and the needs for the transit dependent are very great, and we are working through groups such as the Bus Riders Union that represent transit dependent populations, as well as working with Metro that they have requirements through federal guidelines and standards where they have to provide service, and we want to make sure that we are providing better and faster connections for the transit dependent. It's not just about getting new riders on the system, but also improving the system for those that truly depend on it.
So mainly through the Bus Riders Union that you're getting this voice heard?
Yes.
On the transit dependent? That's the only entity?
No, and we are working with other community groups that just the Bus Riders Union is one of the bigger groups that represent this constituency, but we are also working with a lot of different communities that also, our outreach has been in multiple languages as well, so we're reaching constituencies in that manner as well.
Great. Sir?
We are involved in a separate effort, but in the same line in the west side. And in addition to the outreach we go through for the computer savvy residents, we also have community meetings in neighborhood councils and town halls to make sure we reach out to all the residents and those who need to be heard, so that we can collect their comments. And our consultants are currently going through those comments and trying to come up with a viable list of projects that are coming from the communities rather than just staff.
Is an assumption can be made that the bicycle master plan becomes integral to offering different modes of transportation and also options for the transit dependent?
Yes, as you know, we currently have these red lines and blue lines that are running through the city. The part that's lacking from this whole system is a connectivity and the connection on the west side. So on the west side, our goal is to improve the rail system and the other transit system to create this network where everybody can get from one part of the city to the other.
And one of the overwhelming things that we've heard through this process is that people say that they would ride their bicycles more in the city if there were dedicated facilities. They would take transit more if there were dedicated facilities that made transit reliable for people who want to take transit. So in places where there are transit-dependent populations, we are looking to expand this system of dedicated facilities so that people who are riding bicycles today, that in areas where there are no facilities, will have safer passage to connect to transit and to improve their mobility.
Great. Any questions from my colleagues on this issue? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. We do have two cards on this item. We have Mr. Walsh and Mr. McPherson. I'd like to come on up.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. Look for the picture of Eric Garcetti beheading Wendy Gruhl.
Sir,
First of all, let's
stay
get on
focused.
the issue of density and mobility. The system that we have built, according to MTA, the rail system has $1 billion in deferred maintenance. You haven't seen that in the Times, but they said it to me. Okay, we all know that the worst traffic in America is LA. Then the census came out. We are the 17th worst. There are 16 others. We know this is the least dense city in America. It is the most dense. It is all based on lies. The red line, EIR, 1978, predicted 300,000 boardings by the year 2000. Do you know? Boardings, not people, boardings. You know how many now they have? They have, in the year 2011, 150,000. Half. Lies, lies, lies. And unless we get together with Trayvon, white and black together, they will...
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. McPherson? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. McPherson? Mr. Walsh, please.
Jim McQuiston. I want to say Friday, I went from the marina to downtown to file an action. It took 2.5 hours at 3 o'clock to go from the marina to downtown LA. One time I went from Hollywood Vine on the bus to Cedar Sinai, which is about 2 miles. That took 2 hours on the bus. We have to do something about the transit, but we're not doing the proper thing, obviously. We're not getting anywhere.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. Okay, so you know the cards. Any questions or comments on this item? So we can move to concur with the Transportation Committee and note and file the Joint Planning and Transportation Department's report. And that'll be action of this committee? Okay. All right, so we move on to item number 3, Roberto.
Item 3, council members, is a city attorney prepare ordinance relative to solar structures.
Okay. Have the staff come on up.
Good afternoon, council members. Deborah Kane with the City Planning Department. The ordinance in reference today addresses the July 2nd, 2010 motion from this committee to streamline and simplify the department's solar structure processing. Referring to solar structures, I do mean structures that solely support solar panels. This ordinance was approved by the City Planning Commission on October 13th, and this committee recommended that the city attorney draft this ordinance on November 1st. Today, this ordinance is back before you in order to be forwarded to the City Council for adoption. In brief, the ordinance provides increased flexibilities for solar structures by doing three things. One, it removes obstacles to installing solar on carports in existing parking lots. Two, it, for the most part, standardizes the height exceptions for solar structures. And three, it creates a new conditional use process for solar structure projects that do not meet all the other existing code requirements. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, Councilmember Weiser.
Thank you. So I haven't read the details of this means I've read the summaries, but we've had some solar panels go up in different neighborhoods, one in Mount Washington, another in Eagle Rock, and they both had different routes. I think the one in Eagle Rock, the community, when the Occidental College, who was the applicant, they that went smoother, and then the one in Mount Washington was a surprise to people, et cetera. How would this change either one of those two solar panels?
Absolutely. Within the legal state scope, this ordinance in question does not address that issue. However, separately, we have worked to reiterate the existing hillside restrictions that we have on lot coverage in order to address future projects and make sure that those are in line with the lot coverage restrictions on the books today. And we've also worked interdepartmentally as a team to develop this ordinance, and through those meetings, the issue has arisen which you are speaking to. And we have worked collaboratively to make sure that all departments are aware of this and to see within our scope what we can legally do.
Mm-hmm. Now, that both of those others, they apply for variances or for CUPs?
The hillside,
yes.
I believe those were by right. That's my understanding.
One was by right. Yes, Mount Washington one was by right.
And the Montecito Heights.
I'm sorry, Montecito Heights. There was people in my district in Mount Washington
Still
that had issue with it. My constituents across the freeway are the ones that had issue with it. In Eagle Rock, that was by right as well?
I believe so.
Okay, so this would provide a CUP process.
I believe those would continue being by right. This, as I said, this addresses existing parking lot carports, height restrictions, and establishes a new conditional use. But as far as hillside development, within our constraints, we cannot add within our legal constraints, we cannot add additional regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Do you want to clarify?
Hi, okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I think the objective of this is fantastic, and the idea to streamline solar parking is the smart and good thing to do. Hopefully it could be used as a model for other types of initiatives as well. One of the things that wasn't mentioned that I'm looking at here under the exceptions are the length and width also of the actual parking stalls themselves. That I have some concern about, because while we might put solar on top, which is a great thing, I think I'm currently the only council member that's got full solar on the rooftop, and then when I installed it at home, I don't think that I shrunk at all, but we're expecting the cars to shrink. So with that, it's difficult enough now as we get into smaller stalls for people to find parking, or even if smaller cars park there, to open up their doors and be able to get in and out. I realize, I believe I read in here in the draft ordinance that the handicap spaces will not be affected and will still have the same size elements and width elements, but there will be a reduction in the stall length and width on all the other spots. In looking at the diagrams on page 3, I've got some concern about that as it relates to, first of all, we would then lose spots if they were going to shrink down probably, or perhaps gain spots from depending on your perspective.
Well, There are two issues, so let me address one and then the other so as not to confuse them. The first is that when you have an existing parking lot and you want to install a carport with solar on top, the supporting beams are going to naturally land within parking spaces. So currently, without the adoption of this ordinance, once that beam lands in the parking space, that parking space does not meet the required size requirements of the zoning code, that space is no longer compliant, and in essence, you are an entire space short of meeting the required parking requirements for that lot use, or rather that building use. So this is a major disincentive to take an existing parking lot and to repurpose it for solar structures, obviously. So what this does is it allows for that, for one of these solar structures to, if you will, eat up some of the space, but it's within only the parameters granted on page 3, which require that they are on the interior of the spot so that it does not impact vehicular or pedestrian ingress or egress.
So my question there is, then does it allow a restriping of all the other spots to be of a similar or smaller width and length?
No, the intent of this ordinance is that that singular spot will have a pole that is inside of the spot on the interior portion and on the sides.
So you basically lose spots where the poles are going in, is that?
Effectively, they would become about the size of a compact stall. So you're not actually losing.
You're creating smart
space.
car parking, basically.
Not that small.
Not that small.
It's going to be a regular size. It's going to be. So imagine you're pulling into a parking spot, a regular size parking spot with your vehicle, and the way that these are engineered, there's only going to be one. It's not going to be two within one parking spaces. They're going to be separated out. But so it's likely that, or there's a chance that there will be one in that parking stall, and it will be sequestered into the corner and into the far reach of that parking stall at a maximum of 10 inches. So we don't, with the way vehicles go into parking spots today, first, we don't anticipate the car will be into one corner of that stall, and we also don't anticipate that they're always pulled all the way forward, especially with car stops.
So just for clarity, they're not going to be restriping the entire structure for smaller spots?
No.
It'll just be that one space that's affected, or two
Absolutely.
spaces that are affected for the poles?
Yes.
Got it. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you very much. We'll go to public comment. Mr. John Walsh and Michelle Gamanian, I believe. I positive mispronounced her name. Mr. Walsh, on the subject matter.
John Wells, blogging on HollywoodHighlands.org on solar power. Of course we want solar power, but I don't trust these people to give us solar power. Well, they'll give us what the Obama administration gave us, Solindra. I'm telling you. Now, if you want to understand what, and incidentally, I hate to tell you this, but even the LA Times has written a story, solar power is destroying the ecosystem in the desert. Why? Because population growth cannot be accommodated by any form of power source. Now, if you want a professor to tell you, go to endlessgrowth.com. You can read the 2 chapters for free of the book, endlessgrowth.com. And all the liberalism in the world will not solve the problem. We are overpopulated. Endlessgrowth.com. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Thank you. Michelle Gamanian, I believe. Hi. I'm trying.
It's Michelle Garakian. Thanks.
Okay, yes,
I'm from the Los Angeles Business Council. We're here to speak on behalf of our support for the solar zoning ordinance. As you know, the LABC is very involved in solar issues in Los Angeles. We've been working with the Planning Department and Osama Yunan with the Department of Building and Safety on this issue for going on now 4 years, I believe. This issue is absolutely paramount to solar developers in the city of Los Angeles to help define where they can and can't do solar. It helps streamline the process, cut the red tape, so we're very fortunate for Councilman Garcetti and the chairman of Plum. Further, and something that should be noted is that Osama has been recognized by the state of California in helping to reproduce what we're doing here in Los Angeles for the entire state, which is it's great. So I just want to say we support this, and thank you for your support.
Thank you for your time. Any questions? My colleagues? Okay, we can move to approve the city prepared ordinance.
Yes, Councilman. In addition, we need to adopt the February 29th city attorney report because the ordinance was revised.
Okay, so that would be the action of this committee. Thank you very much. Next item, Roberto.
The next item, council members, is a city attorney prepare ordinance relative to multiple approvals.
Okay, have staff, please.
Good afternoon, Tanner Blackman, City Planning. Thank you for letting me present on the multiple approvals procedural revisions ordinance this afternoon. It's item number 4 on your agenda. It's Council File 111140. It's a city attorney report and ordinance relative to amending several sections of the LAMC to create consistent procedures for review of projects requiring multiple approvals and synchronize the expiration periods of entitlements. So this is a central initiative of the mayor's development reform strategic plan. This is something we've been working on in the city planning department for a number of years, beginning in a outreach effort in late 2007 through 2008. We began specifically workshopping this ordinance as part of that code simplification effort. Throughout 2010, we had a number of citywide workshops, a number of focus groups, lots of internal meetings and reviews on how to update this one particular section of our code that had been particularly vexing. It still is, I guess. Section 1236 was added into the zoning code, into the LAMC, after charter reform in 99-2000. When the city created the area planning commissions and other sort of things, we inserted this section in code to coordinate how we process very complicated projects that require multiple approvals. As separately, they all had to have their own separate hearing under their own separate authority. This puts them all together in much clearer ways, puts clear hierarchies in how we process these things, and the result of which will be to basically cut a lot of procedural red tape and simplify the development review process, and also not only on the front end, the approval process itself, but after approval, the utilization for approvals language, and allow sort of cases to be holistically as a project from conception through utilization. And that's pretty much all I want to say on it besides the actual process itself. This was, as I said, extensively workshopped with the public and in different focus groups, and then it was presented to the City Planning Commission in June of last year and to this committee in July of last year. At that time, in both of those meetings, we were still tracking a piece of state legislation. So the now adopted Assembly Bill 208 at that point had not yet been adopted, and so at that time when we presented, I said, hey, instead of us coming back and writing another ordinance to implement AB 208, as we had previously implemented AB 333 and SB 1185, why don't we catch this now and implement the latest subdivision extension law at the state level? And so the differences in the draft that you see for now from what you saw in July reflects those changes, so Michael Postrom from the City Attorney's Office and the City Attorney staff, we work together to incorporate language that closely reflects the state law, but implementing it to all of our approval types locally. Thank you.
This is an example of how the Planning Department and the City Attorney's Office are focused on creating predictability for the investor, for the community, for folks being impacted, as well as efficiencies in time, which equates to money saved for those who are bearing the cost, and resources generated for the city, given that a tax revenue base and the general fund gets positively impacted, because now you have a different level of desirability to invest in Los Angeles, given this predictability. So when we talk about an average general, how much time we're saving, I know it depends on the case, depends on the complexity of the project, the levels of impact on the environment and on the neighborhood. But is there a ballpark figure that we can say these efficiencies accomplished X? Is it even possible to go there?
You know, I mean, every situation is different, and it depends on the nature of the project. There's a slide I used in the workshopping of this that I would show. It was a whole table where I said, this is just one building to be built in Los Angeles, but this represents the sort of 10 or 12 different entitlements and their different authorities and processes. And the problem is that at any point along the way, sort of part of that process, part of that bundle of applications could be sort of appealed off onto its own track and create this very complex situation that we have trouble interpreting ourselves. So on a basis of this will save your average project this much time, I'm not sure, because it has benefits to the small developer who would have to seek a few entitlements just to do a small project. It'll benefit the complex projects.
Well, let's do this. If given the implementation of this ordinance, let's look at case examples of how efficient we are becoming based on these changes, because we went through this whole process for a reason. So we need to exemplify, and if not amplify, that positive impact from a fiscal point of view, but also on the predictability level for both the community and the investor, as well as understanding how we are going to be shaping the future of our built-out environment. So if we can do that as part of a report back in, let's say, 6 months, that's something we could all benefit from, and that's something I would like to see.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, Councilmember?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for this. It's one of the number one complaints that I get, is not just the predictability, but any even certainty, is coming up with a timeline or a time frame or a timeline on what it's going to take. And as you said, from conception to utilization. My question is on utilization. Does that mean a COO or a TCO, or is that when the planning department is done with it?
Okay, so basically, I mean, the project becomes vested once they're in their project, once they're pulling building permits. So they're sort of satisfied the getting through our process, and then they have 18 months to build, right? So in this case, I don't know that that's exactly the right question.
My question was really utilization. You used the word utilization.
Yes.
And I wanted to find out what the definition from your perspective of utilization was, because I want it to mean one thing to everybody.
Yes, sir. Indeed, it is the time one has to utilize the grant in that permit, right?
Okay, so it's not actually really getting to a COO or a TCO.
So technically, our point of the process ends when they go to the building and safety.
It would, Charlie Roush, Planning Department staff, it would be when they pull their building permits, dig their foundations, and pour their footings is vested under state law. So that's when it happens. The advantage of this ordinance is we have many cases where we have a zone change which lasts for 6 years, a number of conditional use permits and variances that go along with that case that lasts for 3 years. If they're in the 4th year, they have to re-entitle all those other conditional uses and variances to go with the 6-year term. So this makes everything 6 years.
Okay, I appreciate that. And so my comment on that was, if we could start looking, and I appreciate that, and this will help a lot on step one, we can look at the word utilization being that they're actually going to be occupying the space, because that's really the model that most care about if they're investing in building a project, is the utilization. And where they get hung up often after this process is a dozen more processes dealing with building and safety, or the Department of Water and Power, or the fire department, whoever that might be, for those approvals could take months, if not years, longer. And so I'd like to look at that holistic approach of utilization being occupying the space.
Absolutely. As Mr. Rush mentioned, the primary benefit of this ordinance is bundling those separate approvals into a holistic project, right? But keep in mind, this is just sort of bullet one of the development reform strategic plan. So this is greater coordination between the departments and other things are the sort of step twos of the development reform.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for our staff? Seeing none, let's move to public comment. We have, I believe it's Jim Rice or Jim Rears with Craig Lawson, and we'll have Beverly Kentworthy. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. Jim Reese for the record with Craig Lawson and Company. And it's a pleasure to be here today to support the multiple approvals ordinance. We're a land use consulting firm that does an awful lot of entitlement work. And by combining the processes and the timelines, we have created a great deal of certainty, not only for our clients, but for the community as well, in terms of what projects are approved and how long the lives of those approvals run. And we also think that defining the utilization in the code makes a lot of sense. For those reasons, we strongly support this and wish you would push it through to council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Beverly Kenworthy, and then Ann Williams. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Beverly Kenworthy with the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. We'd just like to say thank you. Thank you, thank you. This is such an easy solution to what has been sort of this complex problem that I think both developers and communities have been struggling with. We like the fact that this could save some projects, and it also looks towards the future. And I think the idea of creating some metrics around this is a good one, and it'll be interesting to see what those efficiencies are. And we look forward to hearing about those.
This is pro-business and pro-jobs, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Planning Department for their work on this. We really appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association. CCA represents over 400 businesses employing over 350,000 people in the Los Angeles region. And on behalf of CCA and also our colleagues at the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, who regretfully could not be here today, we want to applaud the efforts of the Planning Department's proactive code simplification efforts. We believe that creating a consistent procedure for review, synchronizing expiration periods, and clarifying the language regarding utilization of those approvals will benefit both applicants and communities by establishing a clear and transparent review system. Just as important, the proposed revisions will show potential investors that Los Angeles understands the importance of certainty and will take the steps necessary to create it. Certainty is a hugely important issue for the business community, and we're very encouraged by these reforms. We hope you will join us in supporting them today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Bowman. Christopher Coons. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Reyes, members of the committee. My name is John Bowman with Elkins Cult Weintraub, and I have represented applicants, property owners for many years in the city's entitlement process, and I support very strongly the objectives of this ordinance, particularly the objectives of achieving certainty and predictability. I spoke in support of this ordinance when this matter was last heard by the committee last summer. But last week, the city staff issued a revised version of the proposed ordinance, and I've identified what I believe are two areas that are problematic in terms of achieving the goals of this ordinance and would recommend specific changes. These changes concern proposed section 1225A3B. This is the section that would add either 5, 4, or 2 years to the life, if you will, of entitlements granted between 2005 and 2010, depending on when those entitlements were granted.
Can you summarize and conclude?
The ordinance talks about these extensions being automatic, and yet states that the extensions are granted provided the director makes certain findings. One of those findings is that the CEQA clearance granted for the entitlement is still adequate for purposes of the extension.
Mr. Bowman, can you put that in writing, submit that to the department?
It is in writing. We submitted a letter yesterday.
Thank you very much.
So I would ask that you please consider.
Now, is this from the experience of being as a former city planner as well?
I guess it is.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Coons, then we have Sandy Sanchez and Dean Isaacson.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Christopher Kuntz on behalf of Councilman Paul Koretz. We want to thank the chair for getting this item in front of you. We've only done the research for our district, but in our district, there are dozens of projects that will be assisted by this ordinance. Some of them have not been built, but there will be the ability to build them under existing entitlements. Others are the more common, more complicated problem where even a large complicated project has small pieces. So we've built a building, and during the building of the building, a small piece like the ability to operate a restaurant inside a mixed-use building, that piece has expired. And basically they come back to the city to do those entitlements over again. which is not only a waste of their time and money, it's a pretty inefficient use of our limited planning staff at the department. This fixes all of that. It gives us a straightforward process that's fair and efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Ms. Sanchez, the next, and then we have Catherine Hennigan, I believe. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Reyes, members of the committee. I'm Sandy Sanchez, Government Affairs Director for the Building Industry Association, and I'm here to express my support for this ordinance to move forward. This ordinance significantly fixes the current process and makes a major difference to our builders and developers. And as you stated, it provides the predictability that we really need, especially in today's economy. And most importantly, it doesn't affect the public input process because we've already vetted all that out. So I think this is a major step forward. It will provide the ability to track our projects a little bit more efficiently while also reducing the potential risk to loss of financing for a development should one permit expire out of the entire development process of approvals. So we are very excited that this is moving forward, and we would like to also note that this is going to significantly reduce staff time in tracking all the various permits. So it's a win-win all the way around. We hope this moves forward swiftly.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir.
Dean Isaacson, Honorable Chair, members. I want to really just tell the staff, planning department, city attorney, and the council offices involved with this what a great job they did. I'm a senior developer for senior housing projects that were caught right in the middle of this, and I'm very, very grateful for all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Legrand is sitting to my right. Thank you, and the staff as well for your strong work, and the city attorney's office for their diligence. Thank you so much. We have one more speaker, Catherine Hennigan. Catherine, are you here?
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Catherine Hennigan, Senior Policy Director to Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, and I'm here before you to express Mayor Villaraigosa's strong support for the multiple approvals ordinance. The mayor would like to commend the planning department, especially Michael Legrand, Alan Bell, Tom Rothman, and Tanner Blackman for their efforts in crafting and delivering this ordinance. As a key component of the mayor's development reform strategic plan, this ordinance will be the first step in reforming the city zoning code, which was last comprehensively revised in 1946. Currently, without a synchronized and standardized approval process, many projects that have already gone through the entitlement process and received the approvals in the city and the community must spend time and money renewing permits and face the threat of losing their financing if permits expire. Given the time, effort, and expense required to secure entitlements, disabling a project based on the zoning code technically only serves to discourage investment in the city and hampers the creation of the needed housing and
You can submit that into the...
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Walsh, come on up on this item.
Okay, yes, I signed up on all of them.
I know
Next
you
week,
do.
too.
I know you're very pretty diligent.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been coming to these meetings since Bradley was in, okay? And they're going to streamline the process. Not for you that wants to add one room to your home. No. And what did they say? You heard the woman two speakers before me. It is for the developers. You heard them say that. I was down here. I remember Gordon Alpert. Is it anyone here that remembers when he was our city councilman? No, nobody remembers. Do you remember when Robert Stevenson was our city councilman? He was going to streamline things. Do you remember when Peggy Stevenson was our city councilman? I've been around here for a long, long time, and I've listened to their lies. And as long as they divide us by race and they put in racial people and remember, when it comes to development, there is only one color, and that is white. They want to get Tokyo. And remember, I'm finishing by saying there used to be a group called Not Another New York. No longer. We just started a new group, Not Another Tokyo. Take a look at it. Get your mask. They're going to destroy us.
Thank you, sir. And that concludes public comment. We can move to approve the city attorney prepared ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Councilman, in addition to that, your directive on the fiscal benefits to the city and the number of projects that were created.
Yes. Okay. Can you get that report back?
And planning can prepare that data. Mr. LeGrand says that's
Fantastic.
okay.
Okay, so that'd be good. And let's say in the next 3 months, give us a
6 months, I think you said,
6 months to
Councilman?
get a snapshot?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So I'll be next in this committee. Colleagues, on 6, there's one card on 6, and it's suggested as a consent item. If you approve, we can move on that. Before we do that, we need to hear public comment. That would be Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So that takes care of number 6. We can move on consent. Is that a yes? That is action of this committee.
And
Okay.
And Councilman, there's an item 7, the weekly status report from the Director of Planning.
No status.
Mr. LeGrand, okay, we will reschedule that for the next meeting. Thank you, sir. That being said, now we're here for the, I think why everyone is here, right? Item number 5, can you read that to the record, please?
Yes, council members, item 5 is the report from the Planning Department relative to a general plan amendment to the Hollywood Community Plan.
Okay, it's now about 3 o'clock. What I'd like to do, colleagues, if you're okay with this, if we can do 1 minute each. We broke them up into 3 piles as they've been coming forward, and they are essentially support. In support, we have general comment, and we have opposed. So if we do 1 minute each, if we can do 2 hours, break them up into 40 minutes each, so everyone has a chance to speak, and we'll try to squeeze in as many people as possible. And God willing, we'll be out here by 5 o'clock, if we are lucky. But I know there's been extensive hearings throughout the process. I don't want to circumvent anyone's ability to speak, but was that okay? We'll try to keep it as short as possible. And so we'll have the presentation by the staff. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. Kevin Keller with City Planning. I'm joined up here with Mary Richardson. We can leave that box there, Mary, if that's okay. But you can come on up if you want, please. Okay, so Mary will make her way up to the podium. We're also here from planning on behalf of the Hollywood Community Plan. We have Ken Bernstein, our principal planner, Simon Pastusha, Urban Design Studio, Connie Polini, Susan Robinson, and Nick Marisich. We're all part of the team today that assisted during the public outreach and hearing phase. The item before the committee is the proposed Hollywood Community Plan. Hollywood is one of the 35 land use community plan areas in the city. It's also the first plan prepared under the Department of City Planning's new community plan program. And we're very excited to present this plan to the committee today. The plan has been developed as a citywide plan, as a plan for all departments. It's been developed in close collaboration with other city departments. We benefited from especially the involvement of the Department of Transportation, Recreation and Parks Department, the former Community Redevelopment Agency as well. Mary will give the committee a brief summary of the major plan features. We do have it on the screen behind you, so we'll let you know when that comes up. And I'll end with a brief summary of outstanding issues that you may be debating today. During the weeks leading up to this hearing, and likely during the hearing itself, many comments and requests have been made on the behalf of individuals and community members. Staff has prepared a one-page back and forth compiled by City Planning Department plum revisions for consideration. So you'll have that with you. We can send out another packet if you need it. They're also at the back of the room. There's about 16 items on that. There may be other items added. We want to be able to come back and answer any questions you have about these requested changes as they come up. But we would ask that if the Plum Committee does move the item today, you give us direction on these edits and modifications to some of the planned sub-areas and boundaries. The recommendation in front of you is the Hollywood Community Plan as approved by the City Planning Commission on December 8th. The Planning Commission held a lengthy hearing, made a number of revisions in response to testimony. These input was also received at the November 7th and November 10th, 2011 public hearings that were held in the community.
Can I just ask you a basic question?
Yes.
When did this begin?
What's that?
When did this community plan begin?
When did the community plan begin? Excellent. The community plan, Hollywood is the oldest adopted community plan, 1988. The plan update that's before you was begun and initiated in 1997.
Okay.
Through stops and starts, funding and put on hold, it was essentially restarted in 2005 and 2006, and we had workshops in 2005 and 6. An EIR was prepared and released in 2011, was circulated for 90 days. We had response to comments, released a final EIR in October of last year, and brought it to the commission in December. So it has been a multi-year effort.
So it's a cumulative process that's
Definitely.
built up given each phase it's been through.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Speaking to that, the plan staff has worked with many community members on refinements and plan outreach. We have many individuals, organization, neighborhood councils here today that have been involved in this process. I want to just let the committee know that these groups have provided a great deal of feedback and continue to provide feedback, including extremely detailed comments on our draft environmental impact report that we were able to respond to. As I stated, let's not forget that Hollywood is the oldest community plan adopted. It was never updated in the late 90s and 2000s with the rest of the community plans in the city, and it does not contain the detail and comprehensiveness of current plan efforts. For example, the current plan that's adopted by City Council contains less than 12 pages of text, essentially only one map, and includes no direct policy references to many of the neighborhood protection policies that have been enacted in the last 5 and 10 years. This includes no direct reference to slope density formulas that protect hillsides, no direct reference to mansionization and ridgeline protection. It also contains no urban design guidelines and little direction for bike built form, and also no reference to bike plans and other creative parkland opportunities such as the Hollywood Central Park. In large part due to the active involvement of our community, we are presenting a plan that contains this policy language in its entirety. Last, before I invite Mary to run through the plan components with you, I'd like to just talk about the issue of the regional center in the general plan framework. In developing these plans, planning staff and the Planning Commission look to other adopted guidance in terms of our general plan framework element. This is the city's long-term growth element that was adopted in 1996 and 2001 by the City Council. This plan reinforced the role of Central Hollywood as what's called a regional center. This is similar to areas such as Century City, Miracle Mile, Warner Center. And the concept behind the regional center concept is by directing growth into our regional centers and around transit, we're able to preserve and direct growth away from our hillsides and lower density neighborhoods. The geography of Hollywood is fairly diverse. We have all of that in one community, which provides a lot of discussion and interaction about these concepts, but I wanted to highlight that the regional center is not new and something that's been in place for Hollywood for many, many years. So with that, I will hand it over to Mary Richardson.
Okay, I think we can skip this first slide since Kevin already went through that. We went to APC. We had a hearing last year that was November 22nd. Then we went to CPC December 8th. CPC approved the plan, and the approved plan then went to the mayor. He acted on it, and we are here before you today. Our next step will be to go to the City Council for their final action. Here's the geography of Hollywood in case anyone here is not clear about that. The northern boundary is the 134 freeway. The eastern boundary is the 5 freeway. To the south, we have Melrose and Rosewood, and to the west, we have Mulholland, Wonderland, and La Cienega. Next slide. The purpose of the community plan is to accommodate growth sustainably, to focus development around infrastructure, to preserve neighborhoods and historic resources, to provide mobility options, and promote good design. Next slide. Since 1988, we've had a significant investment in transit infrastructure in Hollywood. We now have the Red Line Metro Rail system with 5 stations, and we have, I believe it is 4 Metro Rapid bus lines. Next slide. And here's a map that shows the location of that transit infrastructure. Next slide. As Kevin said, we are attempting to focus growth around the transit infrastructure, especially in the regional center, which is outlined there on the map. It's the central downtown area of Hollywood. Historically, it was a business district, a shopping district, and it is identified as a place for growth. Next slide. In 1988, development limitations were placed on the commercial corridors and the multifamily residential zones. The FARs on those commercial corridors were restricted to floor area ratios of 0.5 to 1 and 1 to 1. In this plan, we are attempting to restore a floor area ratio of 1.5 to 1 to the commercial corridors, and this is the citywide standard that applies throughout the rest of the city. Next slide. Along the transit corridors and in the downtown regional center, we are proposing to increase the floor area ratios to 3 to 1 and to 4.5 to 1. Next slide. Next. We are focusing the most intense development in that yellow and orange area on the map that radiates around the intersection of Sunset and Vine. Next slide. We have heard the concerns about the scale of development that we will be allowing in Hollywood, and so we prepared these maps to show where we are proposing height limits, new height limits in Hollywood, which are more restrictive than current height limits. Those red areas there are areas where either no height limit currently exists, or we are proposing a height limit that is more restrictive than the current height limit. And if you want to study these maps in more detail, we had them printed out, and they are at the back of the room, available for people, anyone who wants to look at those.
One quick question. When we look at the areas that you were identifying of the existing development, how much of that area is already built out versus how much could still be filled in? Is there a way to make that assessment? Is it half, 1/4 filled?
I think that would take a survey that I'm not sure that we have the resources to do that kind of a survey.
This is Kevin Keller. Just in response maybe more narrowly to the question about these particular height limits.
Right.
The majority of these height limits are really for the neighborhood and village character, such as Hillhurst and Los Feliz, portions of Sunset adjacent to historic zones in kind of the Sunset West, not West Hollywood, but the Hollywood West portion. And also on the upper left of the screen, one of the things we want to clarify is the Hollywood Boulevard Historic District has a 45-foot height limit today. This plan essentially is expanding that by north and south of that historic district, imposing a new height limit of 60 feet to the north, 75 feet to the south. Although there could be quite a bit of development within those new areas, that's really to help ensure that scale transitions down to the historic district. So I think to answer your question, probably in the Central Hollywood Regional Center there is quite a lot of surface parking lots, but they would still have to conform to this 60-foot or 75-foot height limit.
But these scenarios are cultivated based on all the community meetings you had regarding these impacts, correct?
Correct, and in fact this map is a map that we just recently completed last week in response to ongoing community meetings.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next slide. To ensure that the development that comes in will be well designed, we are proposing pedestrian-oriented standards. Next slide. To protect historic resources in the incentive areas, we are proposing a requirement that would require any project that impacts historic resources to be reviewed by the Office of Historic Resources. Next slide. The plan tries to retain the media-related jobs south of Santa Monica Boulevard by prohibiting residential uses there. Next slide. And encouraging a mix of industrial uses with other types of uses around the edges of the media district. Next slide. To manage the neighborhood traffic that flows off of the commercial streets into the neighborhoods, we are proposing neighborhood traffic management plans that would reduce the speed and the volume of traffic in the neighborhoods. Next slide. We are proposing a traffic impact fee on development that would pay for programs such as expanding the dash buses or bicycle amenities to give people more mobility options. Next slide. We are proposing bikeways on Fairfax and Fountain, and we are encouraging study of other streets for possible bikeways in the future. Those are ones that were identified by the bike plan that was recently adopted. Next slide. We want to make our streets more walkable, so we did a street standard study. Next slide. Many of the streets in Hollywood are built out to the historic standards, which allow for a 15-foot sidewalk in place of the current standard today is 12 feet. Okay, next slide. And we modified the street standards where the street was built out to the historic standard, and we thought that was a better standard than the current standard. So we want to maintain those 15-foot sidewalks, and here's an example of how it works to protect the Walk of Fame. Next slide. To make streets more attractive, we propose a number of streetscape plans. You can't see it very well on this graphic, but that would include La Brea, sections of Hollywood, Santa Monica, Western, and I think also Melrose. Next slide. Yes, in East Hollywood, we are proposing a streetscape on Melrose. Next slide. We are proposing design overlays on Hillhurst, Melrose, and Santa Monica boulevards. Next slide. And I would just like to run through some of the actions taken by the City Planning Commission in regards to the Hollywood Community Plan. They added language that would strengthen restrictions on development in the hillsides and limit development along the Franklin corridor, adjust the zoning to maintain the existing scale of neighborhoods in East Hollywood, expand the number of proposed design districts, and strengthen the protection of historic buildings in the R4 density incentive areas.
Great, thank you, Mary. Kevin Keller, City Planning again. Just really quickly to highlight, we do have a one-page back and front list of issues in front of the committee. You may hear these items come up, and we're happy to respond to these issues in more detail. We also are happy to respond to any general questions that arise. Just to reiterate, we have received a number of communications, and just for the record, I think one of the concerns that has come up in this plan is the issue of height and scale of development. And I think although Hollywood does have areas, especially as Mary said, along the Sunset Vine intersection that do have unlimited height, this is not something the plan is providing. It's in the current plan as well. And I just want to really say this has always been in place in Hollywood. Our actions, as you can tell on the map, have, except for 2 properties, reduced heights, not raised heights. But the plan also carries over some important protections from the 1988 plan in terms of floor area ratio. In 1988 plan, any project over a 4.5 to 1 floor area ratio in the regional center does require special approval by the Planning Commission and City Council. That threshold is also maintained in the new plan. It also places an overall limit on floor area in the regional center to 6 to 1. That's also maintained in the new plan. So although the plan is providing base level incentives, we are not exceeding any of those upper end limits that were in 1988. That's one of those issues of Manhattanization, which you've heard a lot about. The plan does not promote widespread towers. It actually further restricts where they could go. Also, historic preservation, we've worked really carefully to include wherever there's an incentive being placed in Hollywood, because Hollywood has a very important collection of historic resources. Wherever an incentive is placed, we have matched that with a requirement that incentive must be used in conjunction with the Secretary of the Interior standards. So that incentive is not an incentive to demolish or to impair historic resources, but must be used in conjunction with that. For example, lots of properties on Sunset have rear lots that could have development in it, but it needs to be done in an important way to not impair the original historic use. Finally, issues of parking. We are not changing parking requirements, and hillside protections. You may hear a lot about the slope density formula. This plan reinforces and actually strengthens the slope density formula. That's used to basically say that as hillsides get steeper, less units are allowed to be constructed on those hillsides versus assuming that they're essentially flat. So I just want to clarify the record, and we're available for any questions.
So you're protecting hillsides and you're reinforcing
the
environment that makes it...
The idea was by focusing growth in the regional center, we would also be directing growth away from some of our more sensitive land uses, such as the hillsides. And as Mary pointed out, the Franklin corridor is an east-west street. It kind of divides or provides a transition area between some of the more low-scale hillside areas to more of the urban core of Hollywood. So the Planning Commission also directed to remove the majority of zone increases along Franklin to try to maintain that lower scale along Franklin. That's included in the plan in front of you.
Okay, any questions for our staff? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job. One question. Go, Councilman Wizard.
Thank you. You're preserving some of the industrial areas, and I noticed they were kind of spots. It wasn't a cohesive industrial area. A few years ago, when I think it was the Planning Department and CRA had sent out a memo that we needed to preserve more industrial zones for our tax base and our manufacturing jobs. I pointed out in parts of downtown that I represented that probably didn't make sense there because there was an emerging residential community. We have new industry that could be in the same zone as residential. It's not the same old smokestack industry that we've seen from the past. So what was your rationale for preserving those areas there? My concern is that we sometimes want to preserve industrial land because we want a place for future growth and taxes and jobs, but at the same time, those buildings or those facilities are not built for modern industry. So what type of rationale did you have for preserving those areas?
Yeah, Kevin Keller, City Planning. Really great question. And it all highlights the uniqueness of each community plan. I know some people have kind of said, oh, is Hollywood going to be a template for every new community plan we do? Obviously, Silmar, Granada Hills, we propose plans, and we're going to be having those plans come out soon that will reinforce the unique character there. Just as Hollywood is very different from downtown. In Hollywood, we were involved in that same land use industrial survey around 2007, 2006. I can't speak to the downtown process, but in Hollywood, we did have quite a wide range of support, and maybe that reflects that very carefully drawn line. But we have a very, and maybe we'll hear tonight about that. But there is a widespread understanding of the importance of Hollywood media and entertainment, and the issue of preserving some of Hollywood's backlot or the media district as an area where we can have that kind of creative campus that would supplement some of the more office uses and entertainment uses on the boulevard. So at least as applied to Hollywood, and the zoning was MR1, it was not an M zone, so it was already a restricted zone to start out with, which might have also helped. But at least to date, we have had a lot of support for that concept. There is a portion of lots along Santa Monica Boulevard that are identified as transitional lots that could transition to be mixed-use housing. That's basically north of Santa Monica Boulevard. South of Santa Monica Boulevard is basically a retention area. So maybe we'll hear more today about that, but I think we have a widespread support of that particular arrangement in Hollywood.
So there'll be some uses, we foresee some uses for these buildings, and they're not old warehouses that just we're going to keep vacant if we continue to be so restrictive on how they're zoned.
The Hollywood industry, I think, is fairly active in those areas, and they're being actively used for media and entertainment uses that are pretty satisfied. We actually have some people proposing new projects that reinforce that. So at least in the Hollywood media district, I think we've addressed those issues. And it does not, again, speak to other communities, because I know that is a concern downtown. So understood.
Okay, thank you very much. I know many of you have written very eloquent letters. We're going to limit 1 minute. So if you can get to the essence of your observation and your statement within that minute, that'd be great. If you find yourself agreeing with the person that already spoke before you, it's okay to say, I agree with the previous speaker, and give us anything new or different that will help us move this along. So that being said, there's 3 council districts that I believe overlay in this particular plan. It's districts 4, 5, and 13. So would any of the deputies of those council offices like to speak? If so, please come on up to the podium. Good afternoon,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Renee Weitzer for Councilman Tom LaBonge. I really wasn't planning on speaking because Kevin did a really great job, but I do want to emphasize a few things. One is south of Santa Monica Boulevard that you specifically asked about the industrial zones. Those are where our studios are. The studios are expanding. We want to make sure that we preserve the land for those studios. North of Santa Monica Boulevard is a mixed bag, and it butts up to R5, and so we have no problem with changing some of those zones and allowing other uses. Mostly we're in support of the Franklin Corridor and also the added amendment today of Outpost Drive by redesignating Outpost Drive to a local street from a collector. So basically, we're in support of the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next speaker, just introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Christopher Kuntz on behalf of Councilman Paul Koretz, Council District 5. We have the westernmost part of the Hollywood Community Plan. We've been really impressed by the work planning has done. They've met basically with every group in our district that's requested. They've had numerous meetings with the neighborhood council. They've really done an incredible amount of work in terms of outreach. It's been a very long process, but we're proud of the plan that's in front of you. We're supportive of the plan. There's some minor changes on your one-sheeter, and we want to make sure those are adopted with your action. But basically, would just stress, we asked for a plan that would protect historic neighborhoods, that would protect hillsides and would channel growth into transit corridors. That's exactly what the plan does in front of you. It has design standards, it promotes walkability. Overall, it is great. And I know there's a lot of concern. There's concern about growth in general and about infrastructure. We think that this plan does address those issues.
Thank you, sir.
We'd encourage you to have the staff address those, but we do support the plan.
Thank you, sir, very much. Thank you much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Marcel Porras, Senior Planning and Economic Development Deputy for Councilmember Garcetti. First off, I wanted to thank the Department of City Planning, Kevin Keller and Mary Richardson for all their work. Also wanted to thank the community stakeholders for all the participation that they've put forward in this meeting. This has not been a quick process. This has been a long process with a lot of community input. And I think that, as you can see by the latest recommendations that are continuously happening through all the work that planning is doing with working with community stakeholders. So based on that, just here to speak in support of the plan. Thank you.
Great. And the mayor's office, I think we have Ms. Hennigan here. Catherine? Is she here for this item? All right, let's move on. I'd like to call up Jerry Newman, Kendra Casper, and Lee Nguyen. I'd like to come on up. That's Jerry Newman. And coming up to the microphone, you can form a line, that'd be good. It's a long walk down that hall. Good afternoon, sir.
Jerry Newman, Chairman Reyes, Councilmember Weezar, pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for your time. On behalf of our clients, Millennium Partners and Champion Realty, we would like to express our wholehearted support for the plan and the recommendations that are being made by staff. The various recommendations that are being made are important to our clients, especially Champion with regard to some discrepancies that exist within the zoning at the moment, and this plan helps clear those things up. And to the extent that you are able to accept their recommendations, it would very much help take away some ambiguities that currently exist in the zoning ordinance. From our other perspective, we think the plan has been thoughtful. It protects business interests as well as protecting community interests. It looks to establish areas where housing can be maintained and where businesses can be implemented appropriately. So thank you for your support for this plan.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Next speaker, just give us your name, please.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. My name is Kendra Casper of Shepherd Mullen.
Can you lean towards the microphone? I can hear you better.
Kendra Casper of Shepherd Mullen. I'm also here on behalf of Champion Realty in support of our plan. I agree with everything that the previous speaker just said, particularly in support of the recommendations that staff is making today to clear up some of the FAR discrepancies. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, council members. Catherine Hennigan on behalf of Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. This plan has been a long time coming. The mayor's fully supportive. The Hollywood community will no longer be built on case-by-case decisions. The business community, neighbors, neighborhood councils, our civic leaders will have certainty and direction and a comprehensive vision, finally. The Hollywood Community Plan is consistent with the mayor's and the commission's and council's do real planning vision for Los Angeles. We feel that this plan does not induce growth, but plans for growth within the Hollywood community area. Thank you for your diligent work, and it's a really exciting day for Los Angeles and the Hollywood community, and the mayor and his office strongly support the community plan and ask that you move the plan forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wayne, as he's coming up, let's call up Richard Plotkin, Edward Hunt, and Javier Tosanian. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, my name is Lee Wen. I'm an architect. I work on a lot of sort of large and medium-scale development projects here in Los Angeles. I live in the surrounding neighborhood. I also am the co-chair of the Economic Development Committee at the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. So I see it from both a business standpoint, but more importantly, I think from a planning standpoint. I think as an architect, I speak to you today that there's no question that the city of Los Angeles will continue to grow, and I guess the question is where and how does it do that? And I think this plan does it very smartly by being able to concentrate future development near the transit, where Hollywood's been very smart about bringing public transit into the city to create the backbone for pedestrian-oriented community and for future growth and smart growth in a sustainable manner. So I urge you to support this plan and the passage of it and moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you.
Richard Plotkin, 6400 West 5th Street, Los Angeles. Excuse me. I'm here both as a member of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council Planning Committee and a city planning consultant. On behalf of the Planning Committee, I've given you an alternative vision for a Hollywood community plan based on the citywide general plan, community general plan framework, and state codes. But I want to speak as a city planning professional. We fully understand that the truly sustainable cities are those in which most residents use transit and live in apartment houses. In Green Metropolis, David Owen has explained in detail why the residents of New York City have a much smaller carbon footprint than other cities like LA. This planning principle, however, needs to be applied in other cities correctly, otherwise high-density schemes will be doomed to failure. The correct formula is high density needs to be paired with high amenities, and this plan does not have the high amenities. This plan will not work.
Thank you, sir. Edward Hunt.
Chairman Reyes and members. I'm Edward Hunt. I'm here this year's president of the Melrose Hill Neighborhood Association. We've very much enjoyed working with Kevin and Mary for the last at least 8 years, I believe, and think they've done overall a fantastic job. Overall, we like 99% of the plan, but unfortunately, on this piece of paper we just got, the projected increase, they have two of them actually, one 3.6%, one's 23.3%. In our neighborhood, the actual calculations work out to several thousand% increase in population. And what they've suggested is number 9 and 10 on your one-pager, especially number 10, which cuts it down to only a few thousand% increase in population, but is something we can live with. So we hope you'll approve at least number 9 and 10. Thank you.
Thank you very much. After Gerard Susanian, we will ask to hear from, I believe it's Mars Lev, Jim Jogan, I apologize, and Suzanne Zachary. Good afternoon, sir.
Gerard Tasunian, Melrose Hill Neighborhood Association, Hollywood Studio District Neighborhood Council. In our neighborhood, parking is, and as well as that in Hollywood, is tremendously difficult. As Kevin Keller just recently said when he was making his presentation, there is no change in parking requirements for any development that will be done in the future. Just like how the previous speaker said, Edward Hunt, I do agree with him. It is a 99% approvable. However, in majority of it, it is not in favor of the neighborhood. So therefore, I, as a taxpayer for the city of Los Angeles, property owner, urge you to make revisions to the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speakers, come on up.
Moslev, thank you for your time.
I'm representing a client that...
Give us your name, please.
Maoz Lev, M-A-O-Z-L-E-V.
Okay,
I'm representing a client that owns a mixed-use couple of parcels on Hyperion, which is a continuation of Fountain, which the plan goes further east from. In other words, it goes west to east, and that property is in the middle, but I don't think it's included in the plan. Our concern is that limiting the density on Hillside, where this property is situated, is too general, and if you have a property that is on a business area and there's a hill behind it, limiting the density on such an area may basically, in our case, is hurting my client. And the problem here is that they're interested in converting a zone that is being, in our opinion, outdated, and because this is being built in the early 1900s, and if they're interested, because it's partly residential and partly commercial, to convert that into a condominium or into an apartment building, they can't do that, and they're in the process of looking into doing so.
Can you submit this in writing, please?
I'm sorry?
Submit your statement. If you have it in writing, that would help us as well.
Sure.
Thank you very much. The next speaker? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Bradbury.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon. I am the owner of a building that abuts sub-area 38A on the plan, which is the area that faces onto La Cienega and is on the corner of Romaine and La Cienega Boulevard. Okay? 38 goes from south from that corner to Melrose. 38A is a unique piece of property in that corridor. My building abuts the back of 38A. I have a residential building that's a 1926 fourplex, and the way the plan is at this time, if I understand correctly, there is no setback between 38A and the back of my property, which are contiguous. All the other properties that go down La Cienega, south from Romaine, all have a very wide alley behind them. Thus, I am in danger of having a building that abuts absolutely a commercial building that abuts a residential property line.
Ma'am, if you could submit your statement in writing
Yes.
with all these specifics, that would help us move on in committee. I do understand that sub-area 38A is in our notes to be reviewed, so the attention is there for that particular issue.
Okay, I did submit a letter and photographs on December 5th.
Fantastic. Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker?
Hi, I'm Jim Gagan. I live Whitley Heights 27 years.
I'm sorry, your name again?
Jim Gagan, Geoghan.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
A Whitley Heights resident for 27 years. For a number of years, I was secretary of Whitley Heights Homeowners Association. I'm glad to see so much approval of this, except for the people who live within this area. On summer nights, spring and summer nights, we get what I like to call a Hollywood Trifecta. That is, the Hollywood Bowl is full, Men's Chinese has got a premiere, and the Hollywood and Highland Theater has got something important going on. For my 22-block drive, it is a 40-minute commute. Highland backs up down to Melrose. Is there someone here, I'm asking you, sir, is there someone here from the police or fire department that say we can take the extra glut of traffic that this is going to bring us? Is there any report from the fire department or police department that says an increase in density in traffic is something that's fine? That God forbid, if you have a heart attack, they're going to get there in time for you. If your house is on fire, they're going to get there. Because for me, it's a 40-minute drive on summer nights to get home.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Is there a report from the fire department? Have they looked into it? Everyone seems rosy about it except for life-threatening emergencies.
Thank you very much. You can submit your statement in writing if you'd like to. Okay. Next group of speakers is, I believe it's Kitty Gordillo, Michael Gonzalez, and Blanton Mason. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Kitty Gordillo. I'm the Development Director for the Hollywood Wilshire YMCA. I also serve on the Sunset and Vine Bid Board. And actually not the last speaker, but I just wanted to say the Y and I myself are in full support of the plan. The plan promotes a walkable, healthy community, and that's part of what the YMCA is all about. Our focus is on strengthening the community, and by increasing housing as well as jobs, we can work on making Hollywood the healthiest community in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. Michael Gonzalez, Gonzalez Law Group, and a board member of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. In support of the plan, Kevin and Mary have done an outstanding and fabulous job of putting together a very comprehensive, smart plan that focuses growth around transit, which is what this city needs. I heard this morning that we are the most densely packed in the country. In fact, New York is not. I was surprised. But we don't have the density where it needs to be, and this is what this plan achieves. I think their efforts should be rewarded with a forwarding of recommendation to the City Council for approval. I always heard next year, next year, next year. Well, next year is now, and we need to approve this plan and send a big positive message to the community that we're a city that's growing up. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we begin, Mr. Mason, Mr. Ebre, we have Charles Ebre, Crosby Doe, and Christine O'Brien. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, my name is Brandon Mason. I am here today in support of the Hollywood Community Plan. As a property manager for Mason Equities and a resident, both of which are in the Hollywood community. I was born and raised in Newport Beach, but fortunate enough to experience the recent revitalization of my new home through various waves, though strictly as a tourist. With that time that has passed, Hollywood has become a far safer environment that I previously could only have experienced by day. Now, an urban environment location I'm capable of enjoying 7 days a week at all hours of the day with my friends and family. I make use of the Metro, both bus and rail. As adoption of this plan will undoubtedly provide, I'm a huge advocate of enabling more jobs, both temporary and permanent, especially for my generation and those to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Charles Eberle. I'm with the Eberle Company. I'm also a member of the board of directors for the Sunset Pine Business Improvement District. I'd like to let you know that I strongly support the Hollywood plan. As we have seen over the last 10 years, Hollywood has begun to transform from a place no one wanted to work or live to a vibrant community with great projects like Hollywood Highland, Sunset and Vine, and now Emerson College. The problem remains that many parts of Hollywood remain stuck in the past and continue to have issues that plagued old Hollywood. A new Hollywood community plan would allow these areas to grow and greatly enhance the entire Hollywood community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Come on up.
Good afternoon, council members, and thank you for this time. I would just like to say, or reiterate, the real problem with the plan is the quality of life versus quantity. The plan promotes additional density, and quite frankly, and I've been a 35-year resident of Hollywood land. In the mid-1980s, it was recognized that Franklin Avenue was inadequate to handle the traffic. It's 3 times worse now, and quite frankly, this plan does not, the increased density is not addressed. The infrastructure will not support it. The one thing I would like you to consider is if this is built, and just think about it because it's not the public transportation that I think City Council wants to force you to use, but the fact is count the number of parking spaces that those increased buildings, those high-rises, are going to have to provide, and then make your decision, because it is a serious consideration and one big flaw in the plan. Thank you.
Before the next speaker, I'd like to call up Jackie Reese, Suzanne Polafronio, and Flora Chan. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello. Christine O'Brien, Hollywoodland. The traffic management plan really needs more clarity. It's just words. There's no clarification there. Specifically, on page 117 of your document, policies to manage neighborhood traffic, you talk about, this was interesting, traffic calming measures. I think that also needs more clarity. And one other item, You've talked about pedestrian traffic. You've not addressed pedestrian traffic in hillside neighborhoods that do not have sidewalks. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, come on up.
Hello, it's Susan Polafronio. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I had a couple issues I wanted to address. First, I'm really happy to see that the Hollywood Freeway Central Park has a prominent place in the plan, very important. I'm a 32-year resident and business owner on Franklin Avenue. I am extremely concerned about the infrastructure and the sort of field of dreams, build it and they will come idea. There is not adequate street movement, there's not adequate parking, there is not adequate transportation. There's comparison to New York. New York has 2,000 miles of track, 344 square miles of including the boroughs. Los Angeles is 444 square miles. We have, as of a few years ago, 72 miles of track. I used to work at County USC. I wanted to be good about not using my car. Took me 20 minutes to get, I worked the evening shift at the hospital. Took me 20 minutes by car, 2 hours by bus. We really need to think about infrastructure before we think about density. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Jackie Ruiz. I have a letter here signed by 36 people of the Melrose Hill HPOZ, and the letter is signed by both residents in the HPOZ and adjacent areas. The density that we're asking for is to be, it needs to be reduced. There are a couple of things that we would like you to seriously consider. One is no R4 and no RAS4 adjacent to the HPOZ. And while I'm talking about actual zoning issues, you mentioned earlier the manufacturing in Hollywood. I've been on the Design Review Committee for various council offices since the CRA was in Hollywood, and one of the uses for that manufacturing is rehearsal spaces, and they're fairly well used.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Could I make this this letter a
Please submit that,
piece of your record?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Where can I take that?
Okay. Have our officer, our LAPD officer. I want to emphasize that. Okay, we have, before you speak, ma'am, Tate Gabrielson, John Tronson, and Marion Dodge. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Flora Chu, the Preservation Advocate for the Los Angeles Conservancy. We thank the planning staff for their hard work on this plan, and we appreciate the time they've taken to meet with us and to address some of our concerns. We're encouraged by many of the amendments in the plan. However, we remain concerned that without incorporation of the Survey LA and CRA survey data into the plan, potential historic resources remain vulnerable to demolition pressures. To address this gap, we urge including demolition review for any property 45 years and older, and requiring proposed replacement projects be ready to proceed before any demolition action is taken to discourage preemptive demolitions and vacant lots. The Conservancy is very much looking to Hollywood in how it sets the standard in terms of planning for historic and cultural resources for future community plans within the city. We look forward to continuing to work with the city as the Hollywood plan is implemented and applying the lessons learned here to other upcoming plan updates. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Tate Gabrielson from Avis & Young. As a young professional working and living in Hollywood, I'm here to support the community plan update because of the numerous benefits I believe come with allowing for density. I plan on being here for a good part of my adult life and would like to be able to look forward to Hollywood's enrichment of employment opportunities, public transportation, and the ability to live where you work. I believe that growth is inevitable. This then allows for a preemptive planning in order to efficiently address the possible problems while maximizing the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Marion Dodge, President of Fieldside Federation. The Federation, founded in 1952, represents 37 homeowner associations spanning the Santa Monica Mountains. The Federation's mission is to protect the quality of life of its over 200,000 constituents and to conserve the natural habitat and appearance of the hillside areas. Therefore, the Hillside Federation supports the Hollywood Community Plan. The Federation worked for many months with the Planning Department to design the baseline hillside ordinance and slope density ordinance, which allow for appropriate development in our hillsides, while retaining as much of the natural topography as possible. These two ordinances were carefully crafted to balance the needs of the builder and the needs of wildlife habitat. Equally important to the plan is the inclusion of the Ridgeline Protection Ordinance and the Retaining Wall Ordinance currently being prepared. The Ridgeline Ordinance will preserve the ecology and the classic profile of the Santa Monica Mountains. The Retaining Wall Ordinance will provide greater variety of options than the current restrictive ordinance.
You can submit that to the record, please.
The Federation
Thank you
would
very
like
much.
to...
Thank you. The next speakers is Marie C. Chess, John Walsh, and Ziggy Cruz. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm John Tronson. I own a property at 1720 North Whitley, the historic Whitley Courts. I'm here to speak in behalf of supporting the Hollywood Community Plan. When I first came to Hollywood 18 years ago, I had a passion for historic buildings, and I noticed that much of the historic inventory at Hollywood was in a horrible state of disrepair. Many of the buildings were vacant. Some of them were being burned down for a variety of reasons. But what I've seen is the underlying fundamentals in the community plan, specifically designating Hollywood as a regional center and a transit hub and promoting density in the area, have greatly contributed to the revitalization, which has allowed our buildings to become important again and allowed me to lease them up and use those monies to fix up the buildings. And I'm happy to report that our building is now fully restored and put on the National Historic Register. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker, come on up.
Greetings. Maurice Jose from Hollywood. I'm not fully excited by the plan because a lot of the information's from old information. What seems to be overlooked too is the fact that they're talking about 45 or 55-foot story buildings along Vine. The infrastructure as it is can't support that. And seems not to be any remedy written into the fact that that's going to increase more traffic coming through. Franklin Boulevard's already choked off. Vine. I think there needs to be another look that limits the height, because that would be it's nice to see Hollywood grow up and get different, but those giant buildings, they're suited for downtown. They fit great down here, but not by the hills.
Thank you, sir.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. The population, by the census, is not growing in Hollywood. It has been shrinking for 15 years. Everything is based on endless growth. There is no growth in Hollywood. As far as where you can take the bus, go to the BRU's website. 1 million hours of service, bus service, cut in the last 6 years. As you know, Mr. Weezer is under investigation for racial profiling, so to speak, by the federal government. This is racism. This is about developers. That's all it's about. You see these people come up, and you've seen the last black person to come up here. I'm telling you right now, I could go to David Zanheiser's story, What's So Smart About Smart Growth, when he was at the LA Weekly. You can find it. It's 5 years ago. Density overload. Smart density is like smart cancer. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Thank you very much. Before you start, we call our next three. We have with us Stephen Chair, JP John Perron, and Sam Kabashian. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Well, hello there. My name is Ziggy Cruz. I'm a Hollywood resident, and obviously it is about Hollywood where movies and myths are made. This community plan, however, community plans are supposed to be based on facts, right? Not on myths. This particular one is based on the biggest one that you guys ever saw in front of you. It's based on a myth that by 2030 we will have an increase of growth, population, people just flocking to Hollywood, but in reality, since the 2000s or maybe even earlier, people have left Hollywood. So you guys are saying that by 2030 we will have 250,000 residents. That's slightly off by 60,000 people who will probably be, less there. the facts that you guys go by data that is so outdated is outrageous, but it fits right into Hollywood, right? Because that's what Hollywood does. They suck stuff out of their fingers, and they go by what can happen. Like the lady just said beforehand, the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Hollywood... No,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, I'm JP, John Perrin, and I'm the president of the East Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. I also sit on the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce Legislative Action Committee and Economic Development Committee. I'm also speaking on behalf of Sam Kabushian, who is next. He had to leave for prior engagement. Sam Kabushian is the Executive Director of the East Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and also a candidate for City Council District 13. East Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce both fully support the spirit and the results of the update. And me personally, I wanted to mention that we keep hearing about Manhattanization. I think it's a little bit closer to Greenwich Village or Soho, kind of the hip, cool place that's in the big city. And it's a modernization, but it also goes back to the 1920s when a concept known as the neighborhood unit came in. And neighborhood unit is basically having all of the amenities and desirable aspects of life within a half-mile walking. And when you add rapid transit to it, you've just got the neighborhood unit.
Thank you
so much.
And Steve Whitten, then Art Simonian, Michael Papwell, and Bill Harris. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Stephen Whitten, Chair of Hollywood Studio District Neighborhood Council. The Neighborhood Council submitted a letter on November 14th, 2011, outlining their concerns, which I don't have time to go into now. But I didn't see a place to mark on the card. We support with a few reservations. We do support the implement of the streetscape plan along Hollywood Boulevard and Western Avenue, the densification along the major transit corridors, and reducing density in the Hollywood Studio District area, specifically the areas abutting HPOZ zones and their proposed expansion. I'd like to take time to congratulate and compliment Michael LeGrand, Mary Richardson, and Kevin Keller for some intensive work with our group and many of its stakeholders and implementing some of our requests, and we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those words. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Michael Popwell with Crossroads of the World. Crossroads of the World is the historic property on Sunset. Crossroads owns 11 properties in the community plan. They're all low-rise, residential, retail, commercial, and industrial properties, and we wholeheartedly support this plan. And I am a resident of Hollywood also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Art Simonian. I'm an architect. We own the property located at the southeast corner of Fountain and Gower, and we support this plan 100%. We have been working very closely with Kevin and Mary for some time now, and we understand and we comprehend the plan. And because of this involvement and because of this collaboration, we were able to voluntarily reduce the density of our project from 21 units down to a 12-home small lot subdivision project. And it is very commendable for what Kevin and Mary are doing, because they are looking at the overall Hollywood community and coming up with a plan for it. But they also have the time to sit down with us and to discuss our specific neighborhood corner. And that was very important, because we sat down with them and we discussed the special aspects of our neighborhood and our corner, and they listened and they were able to work with us. So we support this plan and we support the revisions, because our direct involvement with them was a direct result of the revisions, number 12. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker before the next is Rosemary Damonte, Lester Bella, and Ida Hennigan. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Bill Harris. I'm the Executive Director of Hollywood Community Housing. We've developed over 700 units of affordable housing in the last 20 years. I'm here to express our profound appreciation to the Planning Department, Council Office, Mayor's Office, and the Planning Commission for your hard work. We are in full support of this plan as is revised. As a developer of affordable housing, we continue to see increasing demand for our units. So we very much appreciate the higher density this plan provides. I'd also like to speak in support of the revisions that were made to sub-area 9.2. We own many of the historic bungalows that this was designed to protect. We think that the revision allows room for not only the historic structures, but also for affordable housing where appropriate. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Next speaker.
Hello, I'm Rosemary Damonte. I'm with the Greater Griffith Park Planning Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. Everybody's talking hunky-dory about all the traffic and all the good stuff that's going to happen, but according to the statement of overriding considerations in this plan, they admit that they cannot deal with mitigating traffic, water, emergency services, and so forth. So I'm asking you, when you deliberate after all of this, that if you will tell us how you will accept this inability to mitigate, just that because it only will satisfy select few people who will make their money and run, and the businesses who will leave at the end of the day, and explain to the people who are going to live here, living with the abominations that this mitigation will be, tell them how it is going to be beneficial to them. And also, I would like to say that we're for development, but it should complement the cultural and historical value of a city like Hollywood.
Thank you.
We're known for palm trees, not
Thank you, ma'am.
skyscrapers.
Thank you
And
so
I'd
much.
also like to say that the planning department has been really wonderful. It's just all the other people around that
I
make it
understand.
a mess.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Hi. My name is Ida Hallinan. I've lived in Hollywood for 65 years and in Beechwood Canyon. And I think that there are lots of parts of the plan that are really quite wonderful. But the idea of comparing or trying to create a zone that is kind of like New York in a city where car culture is the culture. This city grew up around the car. If people think that they're going to live in an apartment and walk around everywhere but not go to work or take public transportation to work, this is a silly idea. I think that I'm very concerned about all the infrastructure that other people have talked about traffic in Los Angeles is a joke. If we do this and don't take into account how to deal with the cars and how to deal with traffic and other kinds of infrastructure issues, then this is going to be not very much fun for the rest of us who live here. And I only have 2 seconds left. Bye.
Right under the wire. Great. Before the next speaker is Jim Van Duzen, Bill Zide, and Doug Haynes. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Bella Lonestu. I'm a Hollywood Hill resident for the past 25 years, and I'm concerned because no community plan can be updated until its backbone, the general plan, is totally revised and updated based on current demographic and infrastructure data. To base a community plan update on an outdated and in fact an expired general plan defies state of California planning guidelines, professional standards, and common sense.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Jim Van Duzen. I live in Beechwood Canyon. I'm a 40-something-year resident of the area. I'd like to put a more personal note on this. About a week and a half ago, there was a horrific accident in front of the house. Several of us were down at the car putting out the fire, throwing rocks through the window to get smoke out to try to save the driver until the ambulance showed up. The ambulance finally showed up and took her away. We were informed the next day that she died. Now, this plan, Hollywood's a choke point. It's a choke point for traffic. It's a choke point for everything else going on in the city. The traffic, there's no plans in this Hollywood community plan for Barham, Los Feliz, and the Cahuenga Pass, how to mitigate that traffic. It's going to pack up to downtown as businesses move out of downtown to Hollywood. The traffic backup is just going to be horrific. I'm concerned that I think what the bottom line is, we need a downzone Hollywood. This is going to be a financial problem for the city, and it's going to really hurt business. I don't think that small businesses are going to have a very hard time with this. So. And the Hollywood Hills are not protected at all. The water, traffic's like water, is going to flow through the hills when all these other patches are clogged up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Zide. I'm a long-term resident of Hollywood and a member of the board of the Hollywood Studio District Neighborhood Council. I'm also a member of the LA Conservancy. In 2010, I worked for the census running crews in Hollywood, and the current version of the Hollywood Community Plan still unfortunately fails to address the issues on the ground and does not apply 2010 census information. The population actually decreased in Hollywood by at least 3%, and the census put the non-commercial vacancy rate at about 6 to 8%, but on the ground it was closer to 12%. However, it remains high. Serious planning, parking, traffic, and water concerns alone make an increase in density unwise. These remain the concerns of many residents and businesses in my neighborhood council district and Hollywood as a whole. This plan needs to use the 2010 census information and apply it correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before the next speaker, I'd like to call up Chris Panizan, Gary Silvers, and Fabio Conti. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, my name is Doug Haynes. I'm with East Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and there'll be a number of other members of our Neighborhood Council board that will speak today. Just a couple things. First off, what the plan doesn't do, there are a number of areas that are still zoned R4 and R5 along the 101 freeway. The children who live in these areas go to schools next to freeways. They have one park in the area, Lemon Grove Park, which is immediately adjacent to the freeway. South Coast Air Quality Management District submitted a letter saying that the mitigation for this plan is inadequate. I hope you consider that letter. What we need to do, and what they said, is create a buffer zone and down zone. Also, there are no letters from the police or fire department. We have 314 officers for Hollywood Division. We need 800 for the current population, 1,000 for the projected population. There's no funding mechanism in order to provide for that. That's very important to us because we're vastly underserved. Also, sub-area 9-2, we voted unanimously as Neighborhood Council against splitting up that down zoning because it serves only one developer. It's a continuous Toronto Historic District. We appreciate it if you would reconsider.
Thank you. Submit that in writing as well. Next speaker.
I'm Chris Panizano with Siren Studios, and we have a request to include our entire parcel into the RC designation in sub-area 6-1. I want to say that I'm incredibly proud to be a Californian and a resident of Los Angeles and part of the Hollywood community. The reason is we're the world's capital of creativity, imagination, and diversity. And Siren Studios is at the very center of this activity, geographically on Sunset Boulevard, just east of Vine, and spiritually, these are our core values. We build a state-of-the-art photo studio, nothing like it in the world. It attracts all the leading brands and all the talent, GQ, Google, Paramount Studios, Fitness Magazine, Kohl's. And we just acquired a foreclosed upon derelict building, the complete post building at 6087 Sunset Boulevard. We're going to transform this building into a digital media and arts complex, nothing like it in the world. We host charity events, community events. We are a training center for students and jobs. And as an arts and digital media center, we support artists, we support the quality of life in Los Angeles, and we support Hollywood's most distinguishing traits, which is creativity, imagination, and diversity.
So you are for the proposal?
What's that?
You are for or against the proposal?
I am for the plan.
Okay, I want to make sure I heard that right.
And I have submitted this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Silvers. I'm a former president of the Hollywood Property Owners Association, a past director of the Hollywood Chamber, member of the Hollywood Chamber. I live in the Hollywood Hills, and we violently object to any ordinance that would let developers come in and divide lots that were intended for one family house and want to put more than that, block views, density that our roads are not able to handle, and we hope that nothing of this sort will go across your table. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before our next speaker, Fran Reichenbach, Daniel Costa, and John Allen. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Fabio Conti, resident and business owner in Hollywood for over 20 years. So I saw the revitalization process. It was fun. It was good. I saw how businesses came back to Hollywood. I saw how social services took homeless people out of the street and housed them. I saw movie theaters, grocery stores opening up. You have a sense of community that I never had before. I'm lucky enough to live a mile away from the restaurant. There's a restaurant. So I wish a lot of people could do that. It's a very good thing to be able to walk to work in case your car doesn't start. I wish a lot more people could be able to do that. I'm also a father of 2 young boys. I see they're pushing for a more open spaces area, and that's what we are lacking. That's what we need, that I would like to see. So I am the support for the plan.
Great. Thank you, sir. Come on up.
Can I give these two?
Give it to the clerk,
For
please.
inclusion.
Oh, the guard. There you go. Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Fran Reichenbach. I'm with SaveHollywood.org. One thing I want to say is I am opposed to the plan. The Hollywood Community Plan is not in harmony with the general plan framework element. The general plan framework element is a growth neutral situation, and there is nothing about growth neutral in the Hollywood Community Plan. You hear Kevin saying, we want to focus growth here or focus growth there, and you artificially create a density in a certain particular area. That is not growth neutrality. Also, the data in the plan is inaccurate. You've heard people mention about the population going this way, and that in the data in the plan, it looks like it's going that way. Also, the emergency response data is inaccurate. We just found that out through a lot of media exposure. But there's something also that in the Hollywood Community Plan, there's no reference to the tens of thousands of tourists that come to Hollywood every single day, and they need to be protected too.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next speaker.
Yes, hi, my name is Daniel Costa. I've been a resident in the Hollywood Hills for over 30 years. I am strongly opposed to this plan as proposed. Firstly, the projected population numbers the HCP states in their findings to justify this development are greatly inaccurate. Developers were inaccurate in their past projections, leading to a 25% current vacancy in commercial space and possibly residential as well. Secondly, the environmental study that the HCP provided acknowledges the immense strain this project would create on Hollywood's infrastructure, such as police, fire, and traffic, which is already overtaxed as is. Yet they offer no valid solution to resolve these issues. This is a plan that is obviously beneficial to the developers, but has complete disregard for the residents and its community.
Thank you, sir. John Allen. Armin Makazian, Sydney Smilin? Okay, Smilin, come on up. And Jeffrey N. Dowden. Armin Makazian, Sydney Smilin, and Jeffrey N. Dowden.
Hi, my name is Armin Mcpherson. I'm currently the chairperson of the Route 66 Task Force in East Hollywood, part of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council. I see item number 11 as a revision, which is a great first step. I call it a first step because we still need to address other issues. One of the primary reasons of the task force, as you will see in the alternate vision of the community plan in your handout, please review that, is to preserve the height limitation of 0.5 along the corridor. And a great example of this POD is Atwater Village, which has preserved their existing resources, the existing height, and has implemented a successful POD in Atwater. So for Route 66, we do have the California Historic Route 66 partnership, and also Eric Garcetti has committed funds for this project, so please review this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, come on up. Is Jeffrey N. Dowden here? Okay, come on up. You pass?
Okay, do
Come
I
on,
get
sir.
his time?
No, you don't.
No, too bad.
That was a good try.
Yeah, okay, hi. Anything. My name is Sidney Smilo. I live in the Sunset Hills Homeowners Association area. I'm here representing the homeowners. We do want to commend the committee for their hard work. I know how difficult it is. I was president of a homeowners association where we had 204 homeowners who all thought that they were president. But at any rate, we would commend you on this, but we are deeply concerned about the slope density factor. We would love this to be adopted as is, without any loopholes, thereby allowing unscrupulous builders, of which we have many, and developers, to come in and build over-mansionized and overbuilt properties. Currently, we have an 18,000 square foot house being built on a very steep slope. We don't want those things to happen anymore. We have a factor with emergency vehicles as well, so the slope density as written is what we would recommend and we would like you to adopt. We are for the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next group of speakers, Sarah Mcpherson, John Given, and Carrie Morrison. Then we'll have Yolanda Brown. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Sarah Mcpherson. I'm the Executive Director of the Sunset and Vine BID. As members of the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, this is precisely the type of innovative and forward-thinking plan you want in place to ensure transparency and predictability for everyone. It is a community document based on input from residents and business owners alike. It is a holistic plan striking the balance between preservation and development, transit and open space. The Sunset and Vine bid is just beginning to see the benefits brought about by mixing entertainment businesses, educational institutions, residential development, and retail, and this plan will ensure that upward momentum continues. We'd like to thank Kevin Keller and Mary Richardson for their tireless efforts, and due to their commitment, we have a plan that we are really proud of, and I ask that you support us as well. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Morrison. I am the Executive Director of the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance, and we manage the Hollywood BID. There's nothing more that I can add other than we look forward to working with our city partners in building the vision that this plan entails. And I just want to personally commend Mary and Kevin. I don't think I have ever seen two public servants who have greater patience, an ability to listen, an ability to help forge consensus, and more than anything, I think they have educated all of us about some of the rudimentary aspects of planning and how it really helps us move together as a community. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm John Given with CIM Group. I also work for Carrie Morrison and Sarah Mcpherson as members of their board. I, as a planner by trade, have an optimistic view towards change and figure that we do plans and we do development in order to accommodate evolving needs. So I look to the future as envisioned by the plan as a good future. I want to also make a point. This city, the people of this county, invested heavily in 3 metro stations on Hollywood Boulevard and 3 on Vermont. And if that doesn't define an area where concentration of growth and density should occur, I don't know what does. Finally, the process by which one goes about development will not change as a result of this plan. Any of the projects considered will be discretionary.
Thank you very much, sir. Before our next speaker comes up, we have Eric Moore, Sarah Jane Schwartz, and Joanne D'Antonio. Good day, Ms. Brown.
Good day. Chair and council members, my name is Yolanda Brown, and I pastor Blessed Sacrament Church with 3,000 parishioners, and it's a historical landmark in Hollywood. Like the rest of the country, the recession has hit Hollywood hard, and there are fewer jobs in Hollywood than there were 25 years ago. We need more investments and more jobs. The community plan update provides a blueprint for that growth in a prudent way so that we can continue to make progress in Hollywood without sacrificing the community's unique character. City planning staff has worked for 8 years on the proposed Hollywood Community Plan update and held more than 150 meetings with the community. It is time to take action to give the community a plan with clear, updated guidelines with growth opportunities. The plan provides benefits for all constituents, residents, small business owners, property owners, and the businesses we want to attract to Hollywood. It is time to move forward and to adopt the plan. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, ma'am. Wow, right under the minute. Next speakers, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane Schwartz, President of the Hollywood Land Homeowners Association and 30-year resident of Hollywood. The Hollywood Land Homeowners Association strongly opposes the proposed Hollywood Land Community Plan update in its present form. We have been waiting decades for the proper revitalization of Hollywood. Now the very character and identity of this famous and historic city is being publicly raped and its potential being destroyed due to the huge density planned by developers. The infrastructure of Hollywood is old, limited, small in scale, and permanent. Now massive development is on the way. Hollywood should be developed like old-time Pasadena, an area with similar historic, primarily two-story architecture. We want common sense development, not the huge amount of dollars and cents development, payoff development. More is not better, bigger is not better. Just because something can be built doesn't mean it should be. Hollywood needs limits, protections, and preservations, not destruction and high density. Please save Hollywood. Once it's lost, it will be gone forever.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
I'm Joanne D'Antonio. I'm the safety chair of the Hollywood Homeowners Association. I've lived there since 1987. I worked at a production company in the Taft Building at Hollywood and Vine. And this was only 4 years ago, and we had the subway. Access was very difficult, and the producers decided that they would no longer do production in Hollywood because it was just too much traffic, too hard to park, too hard to get through, and we had people commuting on the subway, so it didn't really work. We have our vacancy at Sunset and Vine. The Border Store's been for rent for a year. I suggest that you make a trip during rush hour to Hollywood before you make your decision about whether to approve this plan between 3 and 7 in the afternoon. And I think you'll see what the density problems are. And I don't think you can discourage cars. I mean, that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Eric Moore. Is Eric Moore here? I don't see Eric Moore. Jim Mcpherson, John Gordillo, and Beth Pasternak. Is Jim Mcpherson here? John Gordillo and Beth Pasternak. Good afternoon, sir.
Jim McQuiston. I put a very detailed statement in the EIR. I hope you've all read it. It has a lot of Hollywood history in it because I've been here since 1933, but I'm very interested in Hollywood development. And I have to say most of my suggestions have not been taken. If you don't like Hollywood, move somewhere else. But I hope we do a good job. We need more people actually working on Hollywood plans rather than sitting around. But regardless of the plan, we all know the city council is going to do what it wants, piece by piece. And so a plan is, just a plan. That's all.
Thanks, Mr. Question. John Gordillo, Beth Pasternak.
On behalf of the members of Hollywood Heritage, I thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of the hearing. Hollywood Heritage has been an organization that's been actively engaged with the Hollywood community planning process, and we're delighted to hear that staff has recently revised language related to the transfer of floor area rights program and are calling for the development of a central Hollywood-specific plan or community plan implementation overlay to study demolition controls, lot consolidation, height and building massing. We also applaud the inclusion of language linking the plan's development incentives to the Secretary of the Interior's standards for historic properties. However, we would like to also propose that the committee consider the following: that no building in the plan area more than 50 years old be demolished without staff review. We'd also like to suggest that the city work with Hollywood Heritage to revise the Hollywood Boulevard National Register Historic District to acknowledge contributors which currently fall outside of the period of significance defined in 1985. The boulevard is increasingly fragile and cannot withstand alterations to its contributors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before the next speaker, we'll call up, I believe it's Gallo Medina, or Gallo, Beth Fogarty, and Christiane Ray. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Beth Pasternak. I'm representing the Outpost Homeowners Association, and I wanted to thank the committee, LA Dot, and Renee Weitzer from Tom LaBonge's office for considering our request to reclassify Outpost Drive as a local hillside street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Gallo.
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 Okay, sir.
I grew up in Hollywood, born and raised a mile from Hollywood sign, graduated from Blessed Sacrament on Sunset. I'm a member of the board of the Hollywood Business Improvement District, and I own property on Hollywood Boulevard. For decades, we've piecemealed Hollywood together. The zoning ordinance here, a variance over here. Naturally, we have all of these issues. Finally, the city, residents, investors can now work together for a plan to grow forward. We have to face reality. Los Angeles is an alpha city. Hollywood is still buried from old ordinances. I also want to emphasize one thing. By bringing in investors, we bring a commodity that we need throughout the United States, and Hollywood is lucky enough to finally get, and that's jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is Beth Fogarty. I live in the Sunset Hills area. We are happy with the plan as it stands with regard to slope density, and we'd like to thank Kevin and Mary for all the input on this, and we hope that you'll stick with all the wording that's in the current plan. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. For our next speaker, I'd like to call up Brad Torgan, George Abrams, and George Scarpellos. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Christian Ray, and I'm representing the Saban Free Clinic in its full support of the Hollywood Community Plan. The Saban Free Clinic annually provides nearly 16,000 patient visits at its Hollywood Boulevard location for uninsured residents. There continues to be a great demand for healthcare services, greater than we can currently meet in our current structure. Adopting this new plan would afford us the option of reconstructing our site so that we can better meet the unmet needs of the community. Thank you for noting our approval.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir?
Yeah, George Abraham, SaveHollywood.org. I support the alternative vision submitted by Richard Platkin. As you'll notice on the matrix, it's downzoning, not upzoning. I'd like to add to that matrix that one of the most overzoned areas in Hollywood is Beechwood Canyon, and the fire response time is far below the LAFD average and severely below the federal standard. There is only one collector street with a single egress from Beechwood Canyon. It's a danger to public safety to allow build-out to the current zoning maximum, and the Beechwood Canyon should be included in the downzoning in the alternative matrix.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Thank you. I'm Brad Torgan from the Silverstein Law Firm on behalf of the La Mirada Avenue Neighborhood Association, and I did submit correspondence yesterday. 3 problems. First, SCAG projected an increase of about 22,000 people. But now with the correct baseline, we found out the plan provides for 46,000. That amount of growth isn't fully analyzed in the EIR and violates the general plan framework element. The final EIR tries to justify this growth inducement, but uses misleading and inaccurate census data in doing so. Second, the EIR provides no alternatives. A project can't be an alternative to itself, and a purported alternative that shows no difference in policies, programs, land use, or zoning doesn't qualify as an alternative either. Finally, context is important. Most of the new density is hitched to a CRA honeypot that no longer exists. It's time to step back and recalibrate the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is George Scarpellos. I'm the newsletter editor for the Hollywood Dell Civic Association. This is a neighborhood which exists between Argyle and Cahuenga, north of Franklin. This area is heavily impacted by what goes on in Hollywood, and although there is talk of improved transit, that transit doesn't reach to us. And in fact, we suspect there will be higher traffic impact, and although the plan has hopes and good intentions for improved traffic and addressing these issues, the reality is not there. And we have grave misgivings about the impact of this traffic and those kinds of effects on public safety, on police and fire services to our neighborhood in particular. And we wish that there would be more input from fire and police in dealing with how this will impact surrounding neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Laurie Becklin, Patrick Fogarty, and John Goodwin. And David Bell? Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lori Backlund, also from Hollywood Dell. I've lived there for 30 years almost. I also am on our committee that works with the Millennium Project. We are right straight north of Hollywood and Vine and are the most impacted community, except perhaps for the southern end of this, and there are almost no residents speaking for that, about this whole plan. Our only egress to the south for thousands of residents McMansionized over the past years is through one street. And I request specifically, we sent a letter, by the way, it appears not to have gotten there, that has details of this. I'll give it to Kevin or Mary. But there is no mobility study at all of all the streets in no walkability study of the streets in the hills. There's we asked for a mobility study of our own mobility north and south. Please put the farmers market and Lake Hollywood, both of these are historic, important sources are you hearing me? Important sources of recreation. And at the moment, the Hollywood Dam is still closed, and it appears there's a building on the only parking lot there, so we can't access it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. May I leave this with you?
Yes, please. Next speaker.
Hi, Patrick Fogarty, resident of the Bird Streets. I just wanted to say that with regard to slope density, I wanted to make sure that the wording remains the same in order to protect all the residents, and that it can't be manipulated by any developers. Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker.
John Goodwin. So I'm very much in favor of the Hollywood Community Plan. I have property on Hollywood Boulevard on Sycamore. I'm also on the Board of Directors for the Hollywood Chamber and on the Friends of Hollywood Central Park. And thank you very much for that the Central Park is included in there. I'm very much in favor of what it's going to do to make Hollywood a regional center. I work a lot with the Hollywood Christmas Parade, and we've just in the last 2 years gone international in the promotion of Hollywood, and the whole purpose is to drive and get more interest into Hollywood itself. So the fact of making a regional center is a very important part to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. David Bell? I did call George Abrams already, correct? George Abrams? Yes. All right.
Hi, my name is David Bell. I'm the president of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council has opposed the plan. I think overall we sort of feel that it's kind of a cart before the horse plan. It increases density around transit corridors, which are basically not fully developed. It's not a comprehensive system like New York or Chicago. There's no diversity of uses in the area, including parks and open space. East Hollywood has no parks, and it's really not handled in this plan. There's somebody come up and said that what we want to do with a plan like this is eliminate case-by-case analysis of development. And I think when you do that, what you do is you're basically depriving the members of the community of a voice in the development that happens in their community. And that's why the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council has submitted an alternative plan. I would hope the committee would take a look at that plan. It's comprehensive for our area, and it answers all the needs that are not addressed by this plan. This is Hollywood, not Century City, and I think we should keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have Lori Goldman, Scott Campbell, and Alfredo Hernandez, and Marty Shelton. Good afternoon.
Hello. Thank you. Lori Goldman, board member and officer of Central Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and chair of our ad hoc committee on the community plan. On behalf of our stakeholders in Central Hollywood, we're pleased to testify in support of the plan. We limited our scope to our own boundaries of CHNC and spent 18 months reviewing every document. We want to thank Kevin and Mary for working with us and helping us make the changes that we saw fit for our neighborhood council, changes that integrated many enhancements that we requested. We also support a recommendation in front of you for a community plan implementation ordinance, which will help us have mitigations that are enforceable in our district. So we support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Scott Campbell. I'm president of Central Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and I'm here to let you know that we support the Hollywood Community Plan update for our area. And I'm very pleased that the CPIO has made it, which is one of your additional recommendations today. I'm also a member of the board of Friends of Hollywood Central Park, and we're very pleased that that has made it into the plan as well. And thanks to Kevin and Mary again for working with us so closely.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Marty Shelton. I'm the chairman for the Chamber of Commerce in Hollywood. And to the committee, I want to thank, again, like everyone else has, the work that has been done by Mary and Kevin and also Michael LeGrand. One of the things that having been involved with the plan for over 7 years, there's been a lot that's gone into the plan. You've seen both sides in terms of the passion for opposed and supporting of the plan. These people aren't going to go anywhere. They've been good, hardworking people. I think having a plan be approved and to continue to work with Mary and Kevin for a lot of the issues that had been brought forward by the opposition, you've got a good working staff with the Planning Commission, and we support the plan, and we think going forward that these people will work together with the community to make sure what issues they might have will be worked out, and we'll have a good working city.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alfredo Hernandez, are you here? Okay, Will Wright, LaRon Gubler, and Matthew Cooper, and Chris Barton. Good afternoon, Mr. Wright.
Good day. My name is Will Wright. I work for the American Institute of Architects, and I'm pleased to be here to commend the hard work of the Planning Department to bring this forward. It's been a tremendous process. I think a reminder here, the community plan is just one of 35. We have quite a bit more to do, and if we can't make this one work, then we're not going to be able to plan for the future of our city. Supporting the Hollywood Community Plan is not only environmentally responsible, but it's economically responsible. If you think of it from a regional standpoint or even from a Southern California standpoint, where in California do we want to facilitate the growth of our future? Do we want to do that out in the suburbs? Do we want to do that in our agricultural land? Do we want to do that in our mountains and our recreational areas? Or do we want to do that in our urban infill opportunities? I think environmentally, the Hollywood Community Plan will lower greenhouse gas emissions. It will make a neighborhood more walkable and more livable and make the people there happier and healthier. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. LaRon Gubler, President and CEO of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. Just a few observations. First, a community plan that is 23 years old and predates the subway and revitalization in Hollywood is woefully inadequate for Hollywood. Second, Hollywood will grow in the future, and we need to plan for that growth. Third, the proposed plan adds new protections for the neighborhoods, and it directs future growth into central Hollywood adjacent to mass transit, which is where future growth should occur. Number four, proposed zoning adjustments in Hollywood are extremely modest in this plan. So I think those are some important points to consider as you look at this plan. And I think it's time to move forward, to approve the plan, and let's get on with a great future for Hollywood, protecting residents and businesses. Let me finally just say, again, as everyone else has, we want to salute Kevin and Mary for their fine work. They are commendable public servants and great exemplars for the city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Not only do I strongly support the plan,
State
but
your
I'm...
name, please.
Sorry?
State your name.
Oh, it's Matt Cooper. Not only do I strongly support the plan, but I'm here today to request that the sub-area 4.5 be extended 1 block west between Cole Place and Wilcox Avenue and Sunset into Long Prairie. I also speak for the Staples and Go Film, 2 adjacent property owners that strongly support the same extension. I think that the area is severely underdeveloped, and extending the plan would be beneficial to the entire city. I wanted to leave you some maps and diagrams.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Submit to the clerk. Our next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Barton. I'm with Hudson Pacific Properties. We own Sunset Gower Studios and Sunset Bronson Studios in Hollywood. Studios are located on 25 acres and house over 1 million square feet of entertainment and office structures. Importantly, these studios also accommodate 2,000 good-paying jobs in the heart of Hollywood. Hollywood has all the attributes to succeed as an entertainment industry except for two things: tax credits and a strong community plan. This new community plan addresses many of the stumbling blocks to the preservation and growth of Hollywood's entertainment industry, where historically, many successful firms have moved out of Hollywood and into surrounding cities such as Burbank, which are eager to capture this industry and its jobs. This new plan is well thought out and is very modest in the context of other regional centers. It removes archaic zoning designations and a carte blanche for CEQA abuse. It will promote responsible investment, particularly from institutional investors who want predictability and are usually long-term holders and therefore community stakeholders.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, Jeffrey Schiff, I believe, Kami Forcati, and Sam Smith. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am in favor of smart growth, and I support the Hollywood Community Plan. Thank you.
Wow, that was, you didn't get a second off of there, that was cool. All right, come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Kami Faherty. I'm with Starline Tours of Hollywood. I would like to say that we are fully in support of the Hollywood Development Plan, and we believe that it would help to develop Hollywood much better than it has been done in the past. With our 180 people that we employ within Hollywood, many of whom actually live in Hollywood, we believe that this would help them to better do their job. Thank you.
Your company supported the Alley Marathon recently, didn't it? The Alley Marathon, your company supported that? Yes, thank you, sir. All right. Come on up.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Sam Smith. I'm chair of the Hollywood Chamber Community Foundation. I'm also a 30-year resident and business owner in Hollywood. We've heard plenty today about FARs and density and transit corridors and transit nodes. But the Hollywood Chamber Community Foundation would like to speak to one issue primarily, and that is quality of life. We believe that this plan, in addition to being a part of the betterment of a community over the long term with good planning, it also provides for new open spaces in support of the Hollywood Central Park, and we believe it provides for the integrity of our neighborhoods. It assures the quality of life that we'd like to see, and for the 60 charities that we work with throughout Hollywood, it provides the future for a quality of life that Hollywood could be proud of. And we urge your support of the Hollywood Community Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Did we already call Jeffrey Schick? Yes. Okay, all right. Nicole Mihalka, and then we have Fred Renstein, and then John Chuck. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi. Nicole Mihalka, Cushman & Wakefield. I've lived and worked in Hollywood for the past 15 years, and I've witnessed these significant changes in the community from the days of blight and crime seeping into the commercial, from the commercial corridors into the residential areas. That is starkly different now, and the impetus for that change has been commercial development in the transit-oriented areas, especially along Sunset and Hollywood. The Hollywood Community Plan promises to continue that improvement, and I urge you to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
I'm Fred Reinstein. I first went to work in Hollywood on December 1st, 1952. And I've been here all that time, and I urge you to quickly adopt this new plan. I point out that over the last decades, what we've gone through is like being nibbled to death by ducks. It's been a tough road, and the community has risen, but mostly it's fallen, and now it's on its way back. So please get this plan done, and done quickly. Thank you.
That was some visual. Okay. So John Chuck, okay. Jose Aguilar, Jeff Zernan, okay. Barry Kenworthy, we always called up. Brian Fobe. Come on up, sir. Come on up.
Who goes first?
Go ahead, Mr. Aguilar.
My name is Jose Aguilar. I want to first promote the fallacy of smart growth. Mr. David Zanheiser wrote an article about it. What's smart about smart growth? May 31st. What I want to expose here is the politicians' hypocrisy on environmental hypocrisy, because they are not promoting open space in this plan. They should add the norm. The norm for open space is 3 acres per 1,000 residents. What they are doing, they're following Michael Roos, who's the progenitor of smart growth. What he wants to do is create the gridlock in order to coerce a solution that would promote bicycle use in the so-called smart growth corridors. They're going to choke the corridors and coerce the public to take bicycle lanes only. That's the end goal. Number one, I want everybody to research what these politicians are doing with the so-called Quimby funds, which is supposed to promote open space, and I want you guys to research what they've done with them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next speaker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Fulb. I'm the president of the Sunset and Vine Bid. I'm also on the board of the Hollywood Central Park. I don't quite understand the concern about open space in this plan, because there is a plan that's been integrated in here for a 44-acre park over the Hollywood Freeway, which would be a tremendous asset to our city, and I wholeheartedly support that. I also want to commend the city, and in particular Kevin Keller and Mary Richardson for their tremendous effort in this process. They made a concerted effort to reach out to every community in Hollywood, anyone who wanted to come and speak on behalf of their concerns and issues. Kevin and Mary were out there. This is a great process of democracy in our city, and I feel that the process has been served. I'm in favor of supporting the plan.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have Jeff Zernam, and then, oh, hey, Beverly. Come on up.
You did call my name, didn't you?
I did.
I did, okay. Beverly Kenworthy with the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. I remember back in the day when I was a field deputy in CD5, and I went to one of the very first open houses for the Hollywood Community Plan. So a lot has changed since then, so it's very nice to be here on behalf of the Chamber. For all the reasons previously stated, we support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Okay, we have Jeff Zernam. Are you here? How about Linda Bybee? Is there anyone else that submitted a card that has yet to be called? Okay, good.
Linda Bybee, DEO Regional Communications for LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to speak in support of the new community plan as it recognizes the investment of infrastructure of the Red Line, since it hasn't been updated since the Red Line came to fruition in the neighborhood. Also, a number of speakers today on both sides have cited the importance of public transportation. And thank you to the voters of Los Angeles County. We are growing the system. The connectivity will be significant in Hollywood as we grow the system, and Expo Line will be opening later in April, and that will be another clear line of connection to Hollywood.
Great.
Thank you very much. And Director Weezar, former Director Reyes, nice to see you. And I want to compliment Kevin and Mary as a fellow bureaucrat for their diligence.
Thank you for your patience. I believe that's the last speaker on the public comment card. We just have staff come up to the microphone. Well, one, congratulations and kudos to the hard work of your staff, everyone involved in the process, and the community stakeholders. But we did hear some statements and concerns, and instead of going line item by line item right now, perhaps colleagues, we can give them time to digest what was said today, review what was submitted on the record, and perhaps in 3 weeks revisit this item in committee and allow for review of the material as submitted today to make sure that we have a strong document that reflects the concerns of the community and addresses the needs of the city as well, and the impacts that are being addressed by the constituents. Is that something that colleagues can support?
Sure. I just want to ensure that our staff did take notes of the comments that were raised so that you were able to either comment on those when we get back. There were some issues I have questions of that were raised by the public, so I would want to ask you to spend some time on those and get back to us when we come back.
Can you verbalize that you were actually taking notes for the record? That was the question.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Kevin Keller, City Planning. Yeah, if it's the Plum Committee's direction, we certainly can report back in 3 weeks on the comments received. We did take notes. We believe we have responses to most, if not all, of the questions that have been raised, but certainly can respond at a future date as well. And we'll continue to work on those responses. That's something we can do.
And one issue that I did want to discuss today is the Conservancy raised the issue of asking for demolition permits through this process, but that's a separate process, right? This plan we can't do that through this process, correct?
The general issue in terms of historic preservation, and I think the Planning Department has worked really carefully with some of the really deep activism in Hollywood for historic preservation. The issues of policies, including setting transfer development rights, and the idea of linking our incentives to the Secretary of Interior standards have been incorporated in the plan. We do include a program in the community plan calling for a central Hollywood overlay, a community plan, implementation overlay, or specific plan that could study such things as demolition controls. In East Hollywood, east of the 101, we do have the Station Neighborhood Area Plan that does have a requirement that prior to demolition, a project has to have approved entitlement. So it does create a little bit of a delay process there, something we can look at there. But the community plan itself on its own is really an element of the general plan, would not normally go into that level of detail. That would be really a citywide code issue, but we certainly want to keep working with the Conservancy and the Hollywood Heritage community.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I also wanted the opportunity, there was a lot of new documents that were submitted today by the public record, so I'd like to review those as well. There were very specific examples. A lady earlier came up and said her particular property, her residential property, was one of the few that didn't have an alley and it abuts commercial property, so I think those are the things we'd like to look at. But I want to say overall this, that from what I did hear come up, the people who were supportive or opposed all had at least a compliment or said nothing about staff, and that's rare. I heard no complaints at all from anybody in the community that said the staff did not reach out. While they may not have supported what was presented, everybody was very complimentary on staff. And that says a lot because, and I think I want to recognize them, whether you support or oppose, whatever your position, that just says that the staff work tirelessly, day in and day out. A lot of evening meetings, weekend meetings, taking everything into consideration, and it says a lot. I wish we can say that about a lot of staff and a lot of other departments, and unfortunately we can't always do that. But we do have some staff that is phenomenal and goes over the top, and I think you heard that today. And particularly when you hear a controversial issue or that people are upset or they're opposed or they have an opinion, if they can go out of their way to compliment staff to that degree, y'all have to be complimented on that. And I just want to say thank you for your efforts and your work. So.
Thank you, sir. In terms of this, I do have one question. And when there is an observation about having options to the EIR, how have we postured ourselves, given all the work that's been done on this particular product? How are we addressing that one?
Yes, Kevin Keller, City Planning. I can speak directly to that comment. I think a lot of other comments were raised as well about infrastructure, demographic projections. But in terms of the community plan does include alternatives that have been studied in terms of the EIR, and I think one of the comments was, are there other alternatives that should have been considered in addition to the alternatives that are in front of the community plan? In terms of, we did have a full environmental document. We did do response to comments. These are additional comments we're receiving, and certainly we'll continue as we move through the council process, to review those and perhaps add additional responses. As a general plan document, the level of alternatives often are more narrow as opposed to a physical project. I want to be clear, this is a document, an EIR that speaks to a plan policy versus including an environmental project. This EIR does not preclude or remove any further discretionary obligations of environmental analysis at a project level. So a lot of the large projects that are brought before the Planning Commission, the City Council will continue to have their own detailed study. What I think we did here was has a downzoning alternative been studied as well, in addition to the no project alternative, which would be doing essentially nothing. We also studied a proposed project and a limited density SCAG alternative. We did include some, and I know there's a lot of talk about demographics, we included a fact sheet at the back of the room just outlining, here's the population from the census in 2010, here's the projections for SCAG 2030, here's the estimate from 2005, just so all the facts are out there. But in terms of the alternative, basically, and we'll have to look into this a little more, but basically the alternative of downzoning, something we need to look at, but would not accomplish the goals and objectives of the community plan, which is to provide for future development opportunities in a concentrated way. And again, the only thing I'll add for the record at this point is that all of these issues are projections and census data. It's a policy decision at the end of the day in terms of providing capacity for growth and where that growth goes. The plan itself does not generate the growth. It guides the growth if it occurs. So although we can discuss where that best goes, and we do receive information from the Southern California Association of Governments with projections, those projections do vary over time. The current projection, as was stated, is somewhere around, I don't have my notes, 200, our proposed plan has a projection as currently before the committee of 244,000 people approximately. The current population of Hollywood in 2010 and the census was just over 198,000. If that growth were to occur, that's about an annual growth rate of about 1.05%. So it's not a huge growth rate, but it's not the growth rate we've seen in the last 5 years, obviously, in Hollywood. And again, this is a plan that looks forward to 2030.
Well, it's good to hear that we did cover that issue and that we do have a response to that assertion that Emily is making one observation when in fact with this body of work we are addressing the requirements through the EIR, so that I do appreciate. Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, well, congratulations, we're at this point much farther than we've ever been in the past, 8 years? So, okay, I won't go that far back, but good job. Congratulations. Thank you very much. All right, so that being said, that will just be continued for 3 weeks. I believe the target date would be April 17th.
Correct.
And that concludes the matter, this item. Anybody here for public comment? Okay. Mr. Walsh, public comment, come on down. I think this was a marathon presentation for you today, huh, Mr. Walsh?
I was over at Supervisor, too.
Oh, man.
Trifecta.
The trifecta.
But I won't be here tomorrow, okay? I'm not a glutton for punishment.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, let's say what happened today. This is the start of not another Tokyo. But remember, they are at the mercy of the capital community of the planet. They can put in any rules they want. There is no investment capital for Hollywood. They spent $700 million on Hollywood Highlands, Trizecon. They got $200 million back. They lost $1.5 billion of their money, of foreign money. And this place is like the elephant's burial ground. You will get no capital development because they're listening to me and they're not going to invest their dollars. HollywoodHighlands.org. This is the end of capital investment worldwide for Hollywood.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anybody else here for public comment? No. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.